In Edo's shadowed streets, a fallen samurai wanders, a man haunted by betrayal and bound by honor. When whispers of a conspiracy threaten the fragile peace of the shogunate, he's drawn into a web of deceit, where allies hide secrets and loyalty is a dangerous illusion. As darkness spreads through the empire, one question lingers: will his blade restore honor or drown in the shadows he serves? The streets of Edo, the sharp eyes beneath his furrowed brow, light scanned the faces around him, a labyrinth of shadows and murmurs, whether past and present coiled like restless serpents, for a way to atone for the failures that haunted his every step with the silence of a ghost. Once a samurai of a proud frame, weaving past merchants, had seen that world collapse, children darting between stores, betrayed by those his weathered face, comrades, etched with lines carved by years of hardship and loss, masterless, betrayed little of the storm that raged within. The samurai code that had bound him was a double-edged blade. Honor demanded loyalty and sacrifice. Yet the world he inhabited was steeped in deceit and shifting alliances. With every step, he bore the invisible weight of his past, the echo of his fallen lord's voice, a distant yet relentless call. As dusk bled into night, the air in Edo thickened with the mingled scents of smoke, incense, and the faint metallic temps of looming danger. Lanterns flickered against wooden walls, casting trembling light over narrow alleys that twisted like the secrets they concealed. Ryanosuke's footsteps slowed as he approached one such alley, a place where the city's pulse shifted from the open market's clamor to whispered dealings and furtive glances. From the shadows emerged a figure, cloaked and hooded, the face hidden beneath a veil of darkness. The informant's voice was low and cautious, barely more than a breath. "Takeda-san," the voice murmured, "the peace you seek is but a fragile mask. Beneath it, forces gather that threaten to rend the shogunate asunder." Ryunosuke met the gaze that flickered from beneath the hood, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Who are you? What do you want of me?" "An ally," came the whispered reply. "Your blade and your honor are needed once more." The shadows grow long, and the empire trembles on the edge of chaos. The Ronin's jaw tightened as memories surged of battles fought, of comrades lost, of a code that demanded more than mere survival. He had long wandered, a solitary figure cast out from the world he once served. Yet something in the informant's words stirred a flicker of resolve deep within him. "Speak plainly," Ryunosuke said, his voice steady despite the unease that coiled in his chest. "What is this conspiracy? Who threatens the shogunate?" The informant glanced back toward the twisting streets, then leaned closer. "There are those within the halls of power who betray the very code they swear to uphold. Corruption seeps like poison, and a storm gathers under the banner of Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki." The name struck Ryunosuke like a sudden gust of cold wind. He had heard whispers of Matsuda, a daimyo whose ambition was whispered in fearful tones. Yet to hear it confirmed in such a manner was a summons impossible to ignore. "Why come to me?" Ryunosuke asked, suspicion sharpening his tone. "Because you are no mere pawn," the informant said. "You carry the weight of honor, and that makes you dangerous to those who seek to bend the empire to their will. But it also makes you a beacon for those who still believe in justice." As the informant slipped back into the night, melting into the labyrinthine alleys, Ryunosuke stood alone beneath a flickering lantern. The shadows danced across his worn samurai attire, and the city's restless heartbeat throbbed around him. In that moment, the burden of his past pressed heavily, but so too did the faint promise of purpose. He tightened his grip on the hilt of his katana, feeling the cold steel whisper its ancient call. The path ahead was fraught with peril, and trust was a scarce commodity. Yet Ryunosuke knew that to walk away now was to abandon the code he had sworn to uphold. With a final glance at the darkened streets, he stepped forward, the first tentative stride into the empire of shadows. The night deepened, and the city whispered its secrets, some meant to be heard, others buried forever. But for Takeda Ryunosuke, the unraveling had begun, and the journey from wandering shadow to avenger of honor was set in motion. As the sounds of Ido's nocturnal life swelled around him, the clatter of wooden sandals on stone, the distant laughter of a tavern, the soft rustle of silk, Ryunosuke's mind sharpened. Questions crowded in, each one a thread to be pulled, a mystery to be unraveled. The fragile peace was a lie, and beneath it stirred forces that could consume them all. He would need allies, cunning, and above all, a steadfast heart. For in the shadows of the empire, trust was as fleeting as the dying light, and betrayal lurked behind every whispered promise. And so, beneath the low-hanging clouds and the flickering lanterns of Ido, the Ronin's tale began, a story of honor tested, of secrets unearthed, and of a lone warrior's quest to restore balance before the empire fell into darkness. The question hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Could Ryunosuke navigate the maze of deception and emerge unbroken, or would the shadows claim him as they had so many before? Only the dawn would tell. The moon hung low over Ido, its pale light casting long, wavering shadows across the narrow streets where Takeda Ryunosuke tread with measured steps. The city, alive with the quiet murmurs of night, seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the storm gathering beneath its surface. Ryunosuke's sharp eyes pierced the darkness, every sound and movement around him a potential threat or clue. He was no stranger to danger, but tonight the air felt heavier, charged with secrets waiting to be unearthed. His journey began hours earlier, when a chance encounter in the bustling market district had yielded a fragment of information, whispers of a gathering among the city's elite, one that did not bode well for the fragile peace maintained by the shogunate. The cryptic symbols scrawled on the paper he now studied were more than mere script. They were a map into the heart of a conspiracy that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the empire. Ryunosuke's training as a samurai had taught him the value of patience and observation. He folded the paper carefully, concealing it within the folds of his simple kimono. The austere garb he wore was a conscious choice. Not only did it mark him as a Ronin, but it allowed him to move through the city unnoticed, blending into the tapestry of Ido's restless nights. As he navigated the labyrinthine alleys, the distant clamor of a festival drifted faintly on the breeze. Lanterns bobbed like fireflies, their soft glow illuminating the faces of townsfolk celebrating the season. Yet beneath the veneer of joy, Ryunosuke sensed a darker rhythm, a beat that matched the quickening pulse of his own heart. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar silhouette emerging from the shadows. Aiko Hanami, graceful and composed, despite the tension in her eyes, approached with the stealth of a cat. She moved with an elegance born of necessity, her plain kimono belying the dangerous role she played within the city's elite circles. Without a word, she pressed a small scroll into Ryunosuke's palm, her fingers lingering briefly in a silent pact of trust. "They meet at the old shrine beyond the eastern gate," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rustle of silk and paper. "Tomorrow night, be ready." Ryunosuke nodded, the weight of responsibility settling firmly on his shoulders. The path ahead was fraught with peril, yet the call of justice and redemption spurred him onward. The following day, Ryunosuke found himself seated in the dim corner of a tea-house frequented by nobles and officials. The air was thick with the fragrance of jasmine and the subtle tension of veiled conversations. His gaze swept the room, noting the furtive glances exchanged between men clad in finery, their smiles tight and eyes sharper than any blade. Minutes stretched into hours as Ryunosuke pieced together fragments of coded language and exchanged glances. The coded message from Aiko proved invaluable. It confirmed his suspicions that a faction within the government sought to destabilize the shogunate for personal gain. Yet, the deeper he delved, the more he felt the walls closing in. Trust was a scarce commodity, and every ally could be a potential foe. The Ronin's stoic nature was tested as he balanced the urge to act swiftly against the necessity of caution. His past failures whispered in his mind, reminding him that one misstep could spell doom not only for himself, but for the fragile peace he sought to preserve. As twilight fell, Ryunosuke returned to the rooftop that overlooked Edo's sprawling maze. The city lights flickered like distant stars, a mirror to the constellations above. The toll of a temple bell echoed through the night air, a solemn reminder of time's relentless march. He allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection, the tension coiling within him like a drawn bowstring. How far was he willing to go? How much of his honor could he bend before it broke? These questions gnawed at him, yet beneath the doubt burned an unyielding flame of determination. The conspirator's web was tightening, and Ryunosuke knew that the night's whispers would soon give way to the clangor of clashing swords and shattered alliances. But for now, he was a shadow among shadows, a silent guardian poised to strike in the name of justice. The murmur of Edo's bustling streets faded behind the sliding wooden door as Takeda Ryunosuke stepped into the dim interior of the tea house. The low hum of whispered conversations and the faint clink of ceramic cups filled the air, mingling with the subtle scent of incense curling from a small brazier in the corner. It was a place hidden from the prying eyes of commoners and officials alike at crossroads for secrets, whispered beneath the veneer of civility. Ryunosuke's sharp eyes scanned the room, settling on a slender figure seated alone at a low table near the shadowed back wall. She was clad in a plain kimono, its muted tones belying the grace of her posture and the keen intelligence glimmering in her dark eyes. Iko Hanami, he approached with measured steps, the soft leather soles of his getter barely audible against the polished wooden floor. "Iko-san," he greeted quietly, bowing slightly. She looked up, a flicker of cautious recognition crossing her face before it settled into a guarded smile. "Takeda Dono," she replied, her voice steady yet laced with curiosity. "I did not expect you so soon." Ryunosuke settled opposite her, his gaze unwavering. The city whispers of unrest, and the shadows grow longer. "I find myself drawn to the source." Aiko nodded, folding her hands on the table. "I have heard much as well. Corruption festers in the halls of power, and those who once upheld honor now play dangerous games." Their conversation wove carefully through the veiled references and coded language that marked the dangerous dance of spies and informants. Aiko revealed fragments of whispered plots, secret gatherings in the dead of night, and officials whose loyalty was for sale to the highest bidder. Ryunosuke listened, the weight of his own past losses pressing heavily on his shoulders. As twilight deepened outside, the tea house grew quieter, the air thick with the unspoken understanding that their meeting was more than mere chance. They were two figures cast from different paths, now entwined by the fragile threads of necessity. Later, beneath the blooming cherry trees that lined a quiet street, Ryunosuke found Kenta Moriyama waiting. The broad-shouldered ronin bore the scars of battles past, his armor worn but meticulously maintained. His face broke into a rough smile as Ryunosuke approached. "You return to the fold," Kenta said gruffly, clapping a firm hand on Ryunosuke's shoulder. "The path is uncertain," Ryunosuke admitted, his voice low, "but there is much at stake." Kenta's eyes narrowed with resolve. "Then we stand together. Our clan may be fallen, but our honor endures." The two shared a moment steeped in memory and unspoken pain, the ghosts of their past lives mingling with the hope of a new purpose. Their reunion was not without tension. Kenta's blunt loyalty sometimes clashed with Ryanosuk's cautious strategy, but beneath it all lay a bond forged in fire and blood. Back in a cramped room lit by the flickering glow of an oil lamp, Ryanosuk, Iko, and Kenta convened their first council. Scattered across the low table were fragmented reports, hastily written notes, and coded messages plucked from the city's underbelly. Ico's nimble fingers traced lines of text, her sharp mind piecing together a mosaic of treachery. "These meetings," she whispered, "they are no mere coincidence. Lord Matsuda's reach extends further than we imagined." Ryanosuk's gaze hardened. "We must tread carefully. One misstep could spell doom for us all." Kenta slammed a fist lightly on the table. "Then we strike before they tighten their grip." The tension in the room was palpable, a volatile mix of urgency and caution. Yet, in their shared purpose, a tentative trust began to take root, a fragile alliance forged in the shadows of Edo's restless nights. As dawn crept over the city, Ryunosuke climbed to a rooftop overlooking the awakening streets. The first light of day painted the skyline in pale gold, the cherry blossoms scattering their petals in the gentle breeze. Below, Edo stirred, unaware of the silent war unfolding within its walls. Ryanosuk's thoughts lingered on the fragile bonds he had forged, the dangers that awaited, and the heavy burden of honor that bound him still. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and betrayal, but for the first time in long months, a flicker of hope kindled within his heart. He whispered a vow beneath the rising sun, the words a solemn promise to those lost and those yet to come. "For honor, for justice, and for the future of this empire, I will stand in the shadows." And with that, the Ronin descended from the rooftop, stepping into the dawn of a fragile new alliance, ready to face whatever darkness awaited. The lanterns of Edo flickered weakly against the creeping dusk, their pale flames barely cutting through the dense fog that curled around the narrow alleys like spectral serpents. Takeda Ryunosuke moved silently beneath the low eaves of the tea house, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. The weight of his katana, sheathed at his side, was a constant reminder of the path he walked, path lined with ghosts of honor and betrayal alike. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of tobacco and boiled tea, mingling with the subdued murmurs of clandestine conversations. Iko Hanami sat at a corner table, her slender fingers wrapped around a delicate porcelain cup. Her eyes, sharp and alert despite the calm mask she wore, flicked towards Ryunosuke as he approached. Their whispered exchange was cautious, each word measured to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Iko Ryunosuke began, lowering his voice to match the room's hushed tone. "What have you uncovered?" She leaned in, her voice barely more than a breath. "Lord Matsuda's reach extends farther than we feared. Officials we once thought loyal are pawns in his game. He's gathering allies among the disillusioned samurai and corrupt bureaucrats. The shogunate's foundations tremble beneath his ambitions." Ryanosuk's jaw tightened. The growing web of deceit was a noose, tightening slowly but inexorably around the empire's neck. Yet the hardest struggle was not against the enemy without, but the doubts festering within their small circle. Later that evening, beneath the cold gaze of a waning moon, Ryunosuke met with Kenta Moriyama in a narrow alley littered with fallen leaves. The flicker of a lone torch cast long shadows that danced across Kenta's broad shoulders. "You hesitate," Kenta said bluntly, his voice rough with frustration. "Your honor binds you, Ryunosuke, but sometimes honor must bend to necessity. We cannot afford your caution now." Ryunosuke's eyes met his friend's, steady and unyielding. and you would risk everything on reckless action. Brother, we must be patient and precise, or all is lost. The tension between them was palpable, a rift forged by differing visions of loyalty and survival. Yet beneath the discord lay an unspoken bond, the shared scars of a fallen clan and a mutual commitment to justice. Meanwhile, in the opulent chambers of Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki, the true scope of the conspiracy was laid bare. The room was suffused with the scent of incense and the soft glow of lacquered lanterns. Matsuda's presence dominated the space. His dark robes contrasted starkly with the gleaming swords of his assembled conspirators. Japan stands at a crossroads, Matsuda intoned, his voice smooth yet laced with steel. The old order is weak, riddled with corruption and indecision. It is our duty to seize control and forge a new empire, one where strength and vision prevail. His words hung heavy in the air, a chilling promise of upheaval cloaked in the guise of renewal. Among his council, nods of agreement mingled with furtive glances, their allegiance born from ambition, fear, or despair. As the night deepened, Ryunosuke found himself alone on the rain-slicked streets of Edo. The city's usual cacophony was muted beneath the storm's steady drum. Raindrops traced cold paths down his weathered face, mingling with the sweat of unspoken burdens. In that solitude, the Ronin's thoughts churned. The conspiracy's tightening grip was undeniable, yet the path forward remained shrouded in uncertainty. His honor demanded action, but the cost of misstep could be fatal for himself, his allies, and the fragile peace of the shogunate. The web was tightening, and within its shadows, Ryunosuke's resolve hardened. To stand idle was to betray all that he had once sworn to protect. The coming days would test the very core of his being, as friend and foe alike revealed their true faces beneath the empire's twilight. But for now, beneath the relentless rain, a lone figure pressed forward, a samurai bound by honor, walking the thin line between light and shadow. The tension between Ryunosuke and Kenta simmered beneath their shared mission, their arguments echoing the larger struggles of loyalty and pragmatism that defined their fractured world. ICO's information, though invaluable, brought no comfort. Each revelation only deepened the shogunate's peril. In the heart of the city, secret councils convened, and power shifted in unseen ways. Lord Matsuda's cold ambition was a storm-gathering force, promising to sweep away the old order with ruthless efficiency. Ryunosuke's path was clear, yet fraught with uncertainty. The web of shadows was tightening, and to survive, he would need more than skill. With the blade he would need trust, strategy, and a willingness to confront the darkness within and without. As dawn approached, the city held its breath. What sacrifices would honor demand next? The answer lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The river flowed quietly beneath the fading light of dusk, its surface shimmering with the last touches of the sun's warmth. Takeda Ryunosuke sat alone on the worn wooden pier, his gaze fixed on the ripples that danced like restless spirits across the water. The soft murmur of the current mingled with the distant toll of temple bells, creating a fragile harmony that seemed almost at odds with the turmoil within him. Memories, sharp and unyielding, clawed their way to the forefront of his mind, memories of a time when honor was not yet a chain, but a guiding light. He tightened his grip on the worn hilt of his katana, resting across his knees, the familiar weight grounding him even as his thoughts threatened to overwhelm. The faces of his fallen lord and clan appeared like phantoms in the gathering shadows, their silent accusations echoing across the years. The betrayal that had shattered his world was no distant tale. It lived in the ache of every scar and the silence of every empty field where once his comrades had stood. A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms from the distant groves. For a moment, Ryunosuke closed his eyes and allowed himself to breathe deeply, trying to find solace in the simple beauty that persisted despite the darkness. But the path ahead was murky, and the weight of the samurai code, the very code that had once given him purpose, felt heavier than ever. The quiet was broken by the approach of an elderly figure, his footsteps measured and steady. Elder Shogun, a man whose presence carried the calm authority of years spent in contemplation and battle, settled beside Ryunosuke without a word. He seemed as much a part of the evening as the shadows and the wind, a living bridge between the past and what was yet to come. "The river does not choose its course," Shogun said softly, his voice a low rumble against the stillness. "It flows where it must, carving its way through stone and earth alike. We, too, must find our path, even when the way is not clear." Ryunosuke opened his eyes, meeting the elder's gaze. "I have failed," he confessed, the words tasting bitter. "I could not save my lord, nor protect my clan. How can I carry the honor of a samurai when my past is stained with defeat and betrayal?" Shogun's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Honor is not the absence of failure, but the courage to face it. The code binds us, yes, but it does not imprison us. There is strength in knowing when to bend as well as when to stand firm." The Ronin's lips pressed into a thin line. "I fear that bending is defeat. That compromise will only lead me back to the shadows that swallowed those I once called brothers." And yet, the elder replied, if the river refused to flow around obstacles, it would stagnate and die. So too must the samurai adapt, lest he become a relic. Ryunosuke's mind drifted back to the city streets of Edo, where whispers of conspiracy and betrayal wove through the alleys like poisonous smoke. The fragile peace of the shogunate was threatened, and he stood at the crossroads of duty and survival. His heart beat with tension and determination, an uneasy alliance between the desire to uphold the ancient code and the stark realities that demanded pragmatism. The elder rose, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Come, walk with me. The cherry blossoms remind us that beauty and loss are intertwined. Even in falling, they give way to renewal." Together, they walked beneath the canopy of pale pink petals drifting silently in the night air. Each step was a measured echo of past lessons and future hopes. Ryunosuke felt the turmoil within him begin to settle, not vanish, but take on a new former quiet flame kindled by wisdom and resolve. "I will carry their memory," Ryunosuke said at last, "not as a weight to drag me down, but as a compass to guide me through the darkness." Elder Shogun smiled faintly, the lines of age softening in the lantern light. "That is the way of the true samurai. Remember, the greatest battles are not always fought with the sword, but within the heart." As the night deepened, Ryunosuke stood alone once more. The river's steady flow, a reminder that even amidst loss and uncertainty, the world moved forward. The echoes of the past whispered still, but now they carried a different message, one of endurance, balance, and the fragile hope that honor, though tested, could endure. His journey was far from over, and the shadows that cloaked the empire still shifted with unseen threats. Yet within him burned a growing determination and resolve to face the coming storm with both the strength of tradition and the wisdom to bend when necessary. The samurai code was not a cage, but a path, and Takeda Ryunosuke was ready to walk it once more, with eyes open to the dawn that awaited beyond the night. The weight of his past did not vanish, but it no longer crushed him. Instead, it became the foundation upon which he would build his future. And as the first stars pierced the velvet sky, Ryunosuke knew that the battle for the soul of the shogunate and his own was only just beginning. The night air hung heavy over Edo, thick with the scent of rain yet to fall. Lanterns flickered along the narrow streets, casting wavering pools of light that barely penetrated the creeping shadows. Takeda Ryunosuke stood silently on the wooden porch of a modest tea house, his sharp eyes scanning the dim outlines of the city beyond. Beside him, Kenta Moriyama adjusted the strap of his armor, his broad shoulders tense beneath the worn fabric. "The information Aiko uncovered is our only lead," Ryunosuke murmured, his voice low but resolute. "If the conspiracy is to be stopped, we must understand its full scope." Kenta nodded, his usual bluntness softened by the weight of their task. "The fewer mistakes we make, the better. But with the shadows that crawl this city, mistakes could cost us everything." The two men had spent the last hour piecing together fragments of whispered rumors and coded messages, all pointing to a secret meeting among the shogunate's highest conspirators. It was Aiko Hanami, ever resourceful and daring, who had slipped into the inner circles to uncover the critical details. Now, her discovery demanded action. Meanwhile, in a secluded alley near the noble district, Aiko moved with the grace of a cat, her slender form cloaked in a plain kimono that belied her sharp mind and sharper instincts. She had navigated the treacherous social labyrinth of Edo's elite with practiced ease, blending charm with subtlety to extract secrets hidden beneath layers of politeness and deception. That evening, under the veil of darkness, Aiko had followed a trail of hushed conversations and guarded glances to a secluded estate. Concealed behind sliding shoji doors, she overheard the low murmur of voices, a council of men plotting the shogunate's fall. Their words were careful, each syllable dripping with ambition and betrayal. "Lord Matsuda's vision will reshape this land," one voice declared, cold and unwavering. "The old order will crumble, and from its ashes a new empire shall rise." Ico's breath caught. The stakes were far greater than she had imagined. Returning to Ryunosuke and Kenta, she recounted the meeting's location and timing, her eyes gleaming with a mix of fear and determination. They gathered beneath the eastern hills, in a manner shielded by loyal guards. "If we strike now, we might unmask the full extent of their treachery." Ryunosuke's gaze hardened. "We move at dawn. Stealth and caution will be our allies. We cannot afford to be discovered, not yet." The hours that followed were filled with preparation, sharpening blades, reviewing plans, and steeling minds for the peril ahead. Ryunosuke wrestled with the weight of his duty and the ever-present shadow of his past failures. The samurai code demanded honor and courage, yet the path before him was riddled with deception and bloodshed. At the first light, the two ronins slipped through Edo's awakening streets, their movements silent as falling leaves. The manor loomed ahead, its walls a fortress of stone and timber. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their eyes sharp, senses alert to any threat. With Kenta covering his flank, Ryunosuke scaled the outer wall, landing softly in the shadowed garden below. The night's chill bit at his skin, but his resolve burned hotter than any flame. Inside the manor, the flicker of candlelight betrayed the conspirators gathered in secrecy. Listening from behind a sliding screen, Ryunosuke caught fragments of their dire plans, assassinations, uprisings, and the overthrow of the shogunate itself. The scent of sandalwood incense mingled with the tension in the air, each whispered word a thread in the tangled web of betrayal. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked beneath Kenta's foot. Eyes turned sharply toward their hiding place. Instinct took over. Swords flashed in the dim light as the confrontation erupted. The clash was swift and brutal. Rhinosuke's blade sang its deadly song, each strike precise and controlled, while Kenta's raw strength kept enemies at bay. Despite their skill, the odds were overwhelming, and the risk of discovery grew with every passing second. Retreating into the maze of corridors, they escaped just as reinforcements arrived, hearts pounding with the knowledge of what they had learned. Back in the safety of the tea house, silence hung heavy. Isio's voice broke the quiet. We know their plans now, but the danger is greater than ever. We must act carefully if we hope to protect the shogunate and those we love. Rhinosuke's eyes reflected the dawn's pale light. Honor demands we stand against this darkness, even if the path is fraught with peril. Tomorrow the shadows deepened, but so does our resolve. As the city stirred awake, the Ronin and his allies prepared for the trials ahead, bound by duty, honor, and the fragile hope of justice in a world cloaked in secrets and lies. The flickering light of the lanterns cast long shadows across the worn wooden floor of the tea house, where Takeda Ryunosuke sat in silence, his sharp eyes fixed on the folded letter before him. The room was thick with the scent of tobacco and the faint aroma of cold tea, mingling with the weight of unspoken truths. Across from him, Kenta Moriyama shifted uneasily, his broad shoulders tense, sensing the storm gathering in his friend's gaze. Rhinosuke's voice, usually calm and measured, was low but edged with steel. This was hidden in the satchel of the messenger we intercepted yesterday. The seal is authentic, the handwriting unmistakable. It implicates one of our own. Kenta's jaw tightened. You don't mean... Before Ryunosuke could answer, the tea house door slid open with a soft creak. Aiko Hanami stepped inside, her delicate frame silhouetted against the dim streetlight. Her eyes, sharp and alert, flicked between the two men. We have a problem, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryunosuke gestured to the letter. The threads of this conspiracy are twisted deeper than we feared. Someone close to us has betrayed our cause. Isio's face paled. I overheard Ishikawa Taro speaking with his men last night. They mentioned a leak inside our circled its hole, those someone with our knowledge could provide. The room seemed to close in around them, the burden of betrayal pressing heavy on their shoulders. Rhinosuke's mind raced, sifting through every encounter, every conversation, searching for the fracture in their trust. Later that evening, beneath the relentless downpour that drenched Edo's narrow streets, Ryunosuke and Kenta stood side by side atop a hill overlooking the city. The rain masked their whispered conversation, mingling with the distant murmur of the restless city. We cannot afford to let doubt consume us, Kenta said, voice rough but resolute. But we must be vigilant. The enemy wears a familiar face. Ryunosuke nodded, his gaze hardening. Honor demands we face this betrayal head on. There is no room for hesitation. Meanwhile, in the shadowed labyrinth of Eidos corridors, Aiko moved like a wraith. Her footsteps were silent, her breath steady despite the danger lurking around every corner. The recent ambush had rattled her, but her resolve remained unbroken. The soft clatter of hurried footsteps behind her signaled pursuit, and she slipped into a narrow alcove, holding her breath as the enemy's search party passed by. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. She knew the stakes had never been higher. Every secret uncovered, every risk taken, brought them closer to unraveling Lord Matsuda's plot, but also closer to ruin. As dawn crept over the horizon, Ryunosuke found himself alone on a rooftop, the city's lanterns flickering like distant stars beneath him. The cool morning air was sharp against his skin, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and the distant cries of awakening birds. In this solitude, The weight of betrayal settled heavily in his chest. Yet, beneath the storm of doubt and loss, a fierce determination burned, a resolve to see justice done, no matter the cost. The empire of shadows might conceal many faces, but Rhino-Suk's sword would cut through the darkness. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but retreat was no longer an option. As the first light painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, Ryunosuke his katana and turned away from the edge. The game had changed. Allies were scarce, enemies abundant, and the sting of betrayal would only sharpen his blade. The knight's revelations marked a turning point, not just in their struggle against the conspiracy, but in the very heart of a Ronin whose honor was both his shield and his burden. With the city stirring beneath him, Ryunosuke stepped forward into the dawn, ready to face the shadows yet to come. The tea house was cloaked in a haze of incense smoke, its faint aroma weaving through the low murmur of voices and the clink of ceramic cups. Within this subdued sanctuary, Takeda Ryunosuke sat across from Kenta Moriyama, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of a single oil lamp. The room's shadows danced across the wooden beams, mirroring the unrest simmering between the two men. Kenta's broad shoulders were tense, his scarred hands gripping the edge of the low table as his voice rose with an uncommon edge of frustration. "Ryunosuke," he began, eyes burning with resolve, "we cannot afford to hesitate. The more we delay, the deeper the enemy buries their roots. Your caution will be our undoing." Ryunosuke's sharp eyes met Kenta's calm but firm. "And your recklessness might lead us into a trap. We must be certain before we strike. The honor of our fallen clan demands prudence as much as courage." The words hung heavy between them, the clash of their philosophies echoing the greater conflict that defined their fractured world. Kenta's blunt honor, a relic from their youth spent amidst the ruins of their fallen clan, collided with Ryunosuke's measured pragmatism, forged by years of wandering and bitter reflection. Brother Kenta's voice softened, the edge momentarily replaced by a plea. "Our loyalty is forged in blood and battle. But if we do not act, what use is honor to a dead cause?" Ryunosuke leaned back, the weight of his own doubts pressing upon him. "I seek not only to avenge, but to protect what remains. If we sacrifice everything in blind fury, we become no better than those we fight." Outside, the bustle of Edo's nightlife continued obliviously. The laughter of merchants and the distant clatter of footsteps stark against the quiet. Storm brewing within the tea house. Meanwhile, in a modest chamber not far from the city's heart, Aiko Hanami sat by the paper window, her slender fingers tracing the wooden lattice as her eyes fixed on the moonlit streets beyond. The gentle rustle of silk accompanied the soft creak of the sliding door as she settled deeper into her thoughts. Her double life weighed heavily on her soul. As a spy embedded within the city's elite circles, she wielded charm and wit like blades, navigating treacherous social currents with deft precision. Yet beneath the poised exterior lay a woman torn between the perilous demands of espionage and a yearning for peace, a life unshackled from secrets and lies. A faint breeze stirred the paper panels, carrying the distant sounds of the night. The soft cadence of footsteps, the murmur of voices, the occasional bark of a street vendor. Each sound reminded her of the world she risked every day to protect. Her gaze fell to a small, folded note resting on the wooden desk-coded message from Ryunosuke. The ink was fresh, the carefully chosen words a lifeline amid the shadows. She unfolded it slowly, the flicker of candlelight casting long shadows across the delicate calligraphy. "Trust no one beyond this circle," it warned. "Our enemies are closer than we perceive." Isio's heart clenched. The dangers were real and ever present. The next day, Beneath the ephemeral bloom of a cherry blossom tree, Kenta and Ryunosuke met once more. The petals drifted silently to the earth like pale snow, a stark contrast to the tension crackling between the two men. "You hesitate too long," Kenta said, voice low but fierce. "Every moment we wait, the conspirators grow bolder." Ryunosuke's eyes scanned the delicate blossoms, then locked onto Kenta's unwavering gaze. "And if we rush, we risk losing everything, not just our lives, but the very honor we fight to uphold." Kenta's jaw tightened, the unspoken weight of their shared past hanging between them. "I do not question your resolve, Ryunosuke, but we must remember why we fight." "I remember all too well," Ryunosuke replied softly. "Our fallen lord, our clan, there is no victory in rashness." Their brotherhood, tested by years of hardship and loss, strained under the burden of their diverging ideals. Yet beneath the discord lay a foundation of loyalty, unbroken despite the fractures. As night-cloaked Edo once again, Aiko met with Ryunosuke in a quiet alcove, shrouded by bamboo groves. The flicker of candlelight revealed the cautious determination etched into their faces as they exchanged a bundle of coded messages. The silence was punctuated only by the rustling of paper and the distant call of a night bird. Each message carried the weight of their hopes and fears, a testament to the dangerous game they played. The risk rose with every step, Aiko whispered, eyes scanning the contents. "But so does the need for our truth to be heard." Ryunosuke nodded, his gaze steely. "We walk a razor's edge, but it is the only path left to us." As they parted, the shadows embraced them, their figures dissolving into the night a brotherhood tested. A spy burdened, and a ronin resolved to balance honor with survival. The price of loyalty was steep, but in the empire of shadows, it was the coin they had no choice but to pay. The chapter closed with the distant toll of a temple bell, echoing through the restless city, a haunting reminder that in this world, every choice bore consequence, and every bond was forged in fire and shadow. The question lingered in the air: could their fractured unity withstand the coming storm? Or would honor itself be the battleground where they fell? The night was thick with an uneasy stillness as Takeda Ryunosuke made his way through the shadowed corridors of the noble estate. The flickering lanterns cast fragmented light upon the polished wooden floors, their glow barely penetrating the dense atmosphere of whispered secrets and veiled glances. Within this carefully guarded sanctuary of power, Ryunosuke sought an unlikely aliyah, Lady Mitsuko, a noblewoman whose subtle defiance of the shogunate's corruption had become a beacon amid the encroaching darkness. They convened in a private chamber, the air heavy with the scent of incense and the faint rustle of silk. Lady Mitsuko's expression was composed, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern as she regarded the ronin and his companions, Aiko Hanami and Kenta Mori. "The shogunate teeters," she began softly, her voice barely a murmur, yet commanding attention. Beneath its polished surface, rival factions claw for power, each willing to sacrifice honor for ambition. Ryunosuke listened intently, his sharp eyes fixed on her every word. The noblewoman's insight was a thread weaving through the tangled tapestry of intrigue he had been unraveling. "Lord Matsuda's reach extends further than we imagined," Mitsuko continued. "His supporters infiltrate the court, poisoning alliances with whispered promises and veiled threats." Aiko leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Do we know who among the officials can be trusted?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lady Mitsuko shook her head subtly. "Trust is a fragile commodity. Some masks hide loyalty, others conceal treachery. We must tread carefully." Outside, the night deepened as cherry blossoms drifted silently through the cool air. their pale petals illuminated by the moon's solemn glow. Ryunosuke and Kenta stepped into the garden, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet, the only sound breaking the silence. "The court's shadows grow longer," Kenta remarked, his voice gruff but resolute. "We are surrounded by enemies who wear the guise of allies." Ryunosuke nodded, the weight of their predicament settling heavily upon him. "Our path is perilous, yet we cannot falter. The samurai code commands us to uphold honor even when the world crumbles." Within a bustling tea house nestled in a quieter district, Aiko moved with practiced grace among masked courtiers, her senses attuned to the subtlest shifts in tone and expression. The clinking of porcelain and the low murmur of conversations provided cover as she extracted whispered rumors, each fragment a vital piece of the growing puzzle. Her heart pounded with cautious vigilance, the knowledge that discovery would mean death sharpening her resolve. Every stolen word brought them closer to understanding the full extent of the conspiracy threatening the shogunate's fragile peace. Later, in a secluded garden, Ryunosuke stood alone beneath the gnarled branches of an ancient pine. The distant toll of a temple bell echoed through the night, marking the passage of time as he contemplated the revelations Lady Mitsuko had shared. The weight of his duty pressed upon him, the burden of honor mingling with the cold reality of political treachery. "Honor is not merely tradition," he whispered to the night, "but a guiding light in the darkest hours." As dawn approached, the shadows of the court held their breath, poised on the edge of upheaval. Ryunosuke's resolve hardened, the knowledge gained a double-edged sword, one that might save the shogunate or doom them all. The game of power had changed, and in its cruel dance, only those who mastered both sword and subtlety would survive. Yet even as alliances shifted like sand, Ryunosuke knew one truth remained steadfast. The path of honor was never easy, but it was the only path he could follow. The night's revelations were but the beginning. Ahead lay tests of loyalty, sacrifice, and cunning that would shape the fate of an empire cloaked in shadows. And Ryunosuke, bound by the samurai code yet free from its chains, would face them head-on, undaunted, unyielding, determined. But in the depths of his heart, a question lingered, whispered by the winds that stirred the fallen petals. In a world where trust was scarce and betrayal common, could honor alone prevail? The answer awaited in the trials yet to come, as the dawn threatened to break the long night of shadows. The air was heavy with anticipation as Takeda Ryunosuke stepped quietly through the narrow alleyways of Edo. The dim light of paper lanterns flickering like ghosts in the humid night. His footsteps were measured, deliberate. Each step carried the weight of memories and unspoken burdens. Tonight, he was to meet former comrades samurai who once fought alongside him, now shadows in the growing conspiracy against the shogunate. The sharp edge of betrayal pressed close, more painful than any blade. Ryunosuke reached a secluded courtyard where the men waited, their armor darkened and faces etched with the hard lines of resolve and bitterness. The silence between them was a chasm filled with fractured loyalty and unanswered questions. His voice, low but steady, broke the tense stillness. "I did not expect to find you on this path." One of the men, a tall figure with a scar crossing his left cheek, stepped forward. "Paths change, Ryunosuke. The old ways serve no one when power is at stake." Ryunosuke's eyes narrowed. The samurai code is not so easily discarded. Honor binds us beyond politics. A bitter laugh escaped the scarred samurai. Honor, what honor remains when our lord was betrayed and we left to rot? Survival demands sacrifice. This confrontation seared through Ryunosuke's heart. He felt the sting of their words as acutely as a wound. The samurai code had been his anchor, But in the face of shifting alliances and political machinations, it now seemed both shield and chain. Later, in the dim confines of a tea-house, Aiko Hanami approached him, her slender frame cloaked in a plain kimono that belied her sharp intelligence. Her whispered words carried the latest intelligence plans and whispers of power plays within the shogunate's elite. "Ryunosuke-san," she said softly, her eyes darting nervously, "the conspiracy runs deeper than we feared. Some allies are not what they seem." He nodded gravely, absorbing the weight of her news. The threads of deceit were tangled and thick, and trust was a fragile commodity. The tension between Ryunosuke and Kenta Moriyama soon erupted within the privacy of Ryunosuke's quarters. Kenta, broad-shouldered and scarred, paced like a caged beast, frustration etched across his face. "We cannot hesitate," Kenta growled. "Your caution will cost us everything. We must act strike before they tighten their grip." Ryunosuke met his friend's gaze, unwavering. "Recklessness will only doom us. The code demands patience as much as courage." Their argument was fierce, a clash of ideals born from shared history but divergent visions. Brotherhood was tested, strained by the harsh demands of their fight. As dawn broke, Ryunosuke found himself alone on a rain-slicked bridge, the cold wind biting at his weathered face. The city awoke slowly beneath a leaden sky, but his thoughts were tangled knots of honor and pragmatism. The rigid samurai code had guided him thus far, but the world now required more a balance between steadfast principle and the ruthless demands of survival. He breathed deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs, resolve hardening within. The crossroads of duty lay before him, and he would walk it with eyes wide open, ready to face whatever shadows awaited. The night air hung heavy with the scent of rain and lantern smoke as Aiko Hanami moved through the winding alleys of Edo. Each step was measured, her feet barely making a sound on the damp cobblestones. The city was alive with whispers, shadows shifting behind sliding doors and beneath eaves. But none were as dangerous as the ones she sought. Clad in a plain, muted kimono that bore no hint of the elegance beneath, Iko melted into the backdrop of the bustling streets, her keen eyes scanning every corner for signs of pursuit. For weeks, rumors had fluttered through the corridors of power secret meetings. Coded messages passed in hushed tones, and the gathering of those discontent with the shogunate's rule. Aiko knew that to expose the conspiracy threatening the fragile peace, she had to risk everything. Tonight was the night to confirm the whispers with her own ears. Her informants had spoken of a secluded tea-house on the outskirts of the city, a place where high-ranking officials gathered under the cloak of darkness. Drawing a deep breath, she approached the small wooden building, its paper lanterns casting a soft, flickering glow that barely penetrated the thick shadows. The faint murmur of voices drifted through the air, punctuated by the occasional clink of sake cups. Isio's heart hammered within her chest, but her face remained serene, practiced in the art of concealment. She slipped inside just as a group of men rose to greet one another, their faces obscured by the low light. Behind a partially opened sliding screen, Aiko crouched, her senses straining to catch every word. The conspirators spoke of plans to undermine the shogunate's authority, their voices cold and resolute. Names were whispered: Lord Matsuda, Nobuyuki among them, shadowy figure whose ambition threatened to plunge the empire into chaos. The weight of their treachery settled in Isio's stomach like a stone. But she steeled herself, knowing that this knowledge was a blade she wielded with care. Suddenly, the scrape of a sliding door startled her. A shadow crossed the threshold, and Iso's breath caught. She pressed herself flat against the floor, silent as the night itself. Footsteps grew louder, echoing in the cramped room. Someone was coming, perhaps alerted by a careless servant or a betrayed ally. Panic flickered, but she forced the calm back into her limbs. When the moment was right, Aiko slipped from her hiding place, her movements swift and fluid. She darted through the back door into the narrow alley, the cool night air biting at her face. Behind her, the shouts of pursuers shattered the silence, their anger rising like a tide. Aiko ran, heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration, her mind racing to find a route that would evade capture. The labyrinthine streets of Ido became both her refuge and her trap. She weaved through marketplaces and over bridges, the sounds of her pursuers growing faint but persistent. Finally, she slipped into the shadowed courtyard where Takeda Ryunosuke awaited, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. "You're late," Ryunosuke said quietly, concern tinging his voice. "I was nearly caught," Aiko admitted, handing him a folded paper damp with her sweat. "But I have what we need." A secret meeting, confirmed. The conspirators gather under Lord Matsuda's command. Ryunosuke's gaze hardened as he unfolded the note, eyes tracing the hastily scribbled details. "This changes everything," he murmured. "We must act swiftly." Aiko nodded, her breath still ragged but her resolve unbroken. "But now they know I'm watching. I'm a marked woman." Ryunosuke placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we protect you as fiercely as you've protected us. The path ahead is dangerous, but we walk it together." The night seemed to hold its breath as the two figures stood in the flickering lantern light, bound by a shared purpose that would test their courage and loyalty to the limits. In the depths of Edo's shadows, a gambit had been made, one that could bring down an empire or doom those who dared to defy its darkness. As dawn approached, the city stirred, unaware of the storm gathering beneath its surface. For Aiko, Hanami, and Takeda Ryunosuke, the game had truly begun. The air hung thick and heavy within the covert chamber, nestled deep beneath Edo's labyrinthine streets. Flickering lanterns cast long, dancing shadows across the faces of men who had long abandoned the pretense of honor for ambition masked as duty. Takeda Ryunosuke crouched silently behind a wooden partition, the coarse grain pressing against his forearms as he strained to catch every word murmured by the figures gathered before him. The room was dominated by a tall, imposing man cloaked in dark robes that seemed to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki's presence was a force that demanded attention even without words. His gaze, cold and calculating, swept the council gathered in his confidence, each man hanging on his every syllable with a mixture of fear and reverence. "Japan stands at a precipice," Matsuda began, his voice low but resonant. "The shogunate's weakness invites chaos. We must seize this moment to reshape the future, to restore order through strength. Those who oppose us cling to outdated notions of loyalty and honor, blinding themselves to the greater good." Ryunosuke's jaw tightened. The words echoed the bitter truths he had grappled with, truths that gnawed at the edges of the samurai code he cherished. Yet there was something more chilling in Matsuda's tone, a ruthless conviction that justified any means to the end. Around the table sat men cloaked not only in shadows but in disgraced mercenaries, whose swords were for sale to the highest bidder, samurai whose loyalty had been shattered by broken promises and lost honor. Their eyes gleamed with a dangerous mixture of greed and desperation. From his hidden vantage point, Ryunosuke caught the name of Ishikawa Taro, Matsuda's enforcer, whispered with grudging respect by one of the mercenaries. This man was a spearhead of their dark intentions, a reminder that the enemy was not only in grand halls, but also stalking the streets with quiet menace. As the meeting drew to a close, Ryunosuke slipped back into the night, his mind racing. The weight of the conspiracy was heavier than he had imagined. Lord Matsuda's network spread like a malignant vine, tightening its grip on the shogunate's heart. Later, in the cold silence of a narrow alley, Ryunosuke confronted Ishikawa Taro. The official's sharp eyes gleamed under the faint glow of a distant lantern. His posture relaxed, but every muscle coiled like a serpent ready to strike. "You tread dangerous ground, Ryunosuke," Ishikawa said smoothly, his voice a whisper that carried the threat of steel. "There are those who would see you fall, forgotten like the ronin you are." Ryunosuke met the gaze unflinchingly. "I walk the path I choose. Your threats do not sway me." The tension between them was palpable, a silent dance of wills where one misstep could mean death. Ishikawa's lips curled into a faint sneer. "Honor is a luxury in times such as these. Remember that." That night, Ryunosuke returned to the modest quarters he shared with Kenta Moriyama. By the flickering candlelight, they spread out stolen documents and coded letters fragments pieced together from whispers and shadows. The sprawling reach of Matsuda's influence unfolded before them. Corrupt officials, bribed guards, mercenaries loyal only to coin. Kenta's broad hands trembled slightly as he traced the lines of ink. "This is worse than we feared." "Yes," Ryunosuke replied quietly, "but now we know the full scope. There is no turning back." The room seemed to close in around them, the weight of impending conflict pressing hard. Yet beneath the despair stirred a fierce flame of determination. Later, perched atop a quiet rooftop beneath a moonlit sky, Ryunosuke allowed himself a moment of solitude. The cool night air brushed past, carrying with it the distant sounds of a city unaware of the storm gathering beneath its surface. He pondered Lord Matsuda's cold rationality, the way the man had cast aside compassion and loyalty as obstacles to his vision. It was a mirror darkly reflecting Ryunosuke's own struggle to uphold honor in a world bent on betrayal. "What is the cost of justice?" he murmured to the night, "when the enemy wears honor as a mask of deceit?" His fingers brushed the worn hilt of his katana, a silent vow forming in his heart. The road ahead would be perilous, but surrender was not an option. For the fallen, for the betrayed, for the fragile peace of the shogunate, he would face the shadows head-on. As dawn's first light threatened the horizon, Ryunosuke rose, the weight of knowledge heavy but his resolve unbroken. The next steps would demand every ounce of his skill, every shred of his honor. The empire of shadows was vast, but so too was the heart of a samurai unwilling to yield. The air in the cramped back room of the tea-house was thick with the scent of steamed rice and lingering smoke from a dying candle. Shadows flickered across the wooden walls as Takeda Ryunosuke's sharp gaze fixed on Kenta Moriyama, whose broad frame seemed to take up every inch of the small space. The tension between them was palpable, a charged current that threatened to snap with even the slightest provocation. "You cannot charge in recklessly again, Kenta," Ryunosuke said, his voice low but firm, eyes narrowing. "If you expose us before the time is right, all our efforts will be for naught." Kenta's jaw clenched, a scar tracing a pale line from his temple down his cheek twitching with his anger. "And what good is waiting, Ryunosuke? We risk losing the advantage every moment we hesitate. I fight best on the front lines, not behind closed doors." Ryunosuke inhaled slowly, the weight of leadership pressing heavily on his shoulders. "The enemy is cunning, and our numbers few. Recklessness is a luxury we cannot afford. This is not just about battle, it is about survival, yours, mine, and all who stand with us." The room fell silent save for the faint crackle of the candle's flame. Kenta's eyes softened, the rawness of their shared history surfacing beneath his stubborn exterior. You carry the burden of command well, Ryu. But sometimes I wonder if your honor blinds you to the harsher truths. Before Ryunosuke could respond, the sliding door opened quietly. Aiko Hanami stepped in, her slender form draped in a plain kimono that belied the sharpness of her mind. Her eyes, bright and unwavering, met Ryunosuke's. I bring news. A secret meeting is scheduled for the night after next. The conspirators will gather at the northern warehouse district. Ryunosuke's heart quickened. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for, but it came with risks that made his jaw tighten. We must prepare carefully, he said, turning to Kenta. Your impulsiveness nearly cost us before. I need your strength, but also your restraint. Kenta nodded, a reluctant respect in his gaze. I will follow your lead, Ryunosuke. Later that evening, beneath the pale glow of paper lanterns strung along Edo's narrow alleys, Iko moved like a shadow, her footsteps silent against the cobblestones. The city's nocturnal symphony, the distant clatter of wooden sandals, whispered conversations, and the occasional bark of a guard dog wove around her as she delivered her intelligence to Ryunosuke. Her role was perilous. One misstep could mean capture or death. Ryunosuke listened intently as she detailed the conspirators' plans, his mind racing to assess the best course of action. The weight of the samurai code pressed upon him, demanding honor even as the city teetered on the brink of chaos. Seeking counsel, Ryunosuke visited Elder Shogun the next day. The old samurai sat cross-legged beneath the soft light of a paper lantern, his eyes deep pools of experience. Honor, Shogun began, is not always the sword struck in battle. Sometimes it is the patience to wait, the wisdom to choose the right moment. Remember the bamboo, Ryunosuke. It bends with the wind, but does not break. Ryunosuke absorbed the parable, the elder's words settling into his heart like seeds in fertile soil. He knew the path ahead would demand both strength and flexibility. That night, on a rooftop overlooking the sprawling cityscape, the trio gathered beneath a moon that bathed the world in silver light. The cool breeze carried the faint scent of cherry blossoms and the distant murmur of Edo's restless streets. Ryunosuke laid out the final plan, his voice steady as he detailed the roles each would play in the coming confrontation. We stand on a knife's edge, he said. One misstep and the shadows will consume us. But together we can turn the tide. Kenta's eyes burned with renewed determination, Ico's expression resolute. The balance between caution and courage was delicate, but their unity was unbreakable. As the night deepened, Ryunosuke felt the old turmoil within him settle into a focused resolve. The lines had been drawn. The battle for justice, honor, and survival was about to begin, and he would lead with every ounce of strength and wisdom he possessed. The city below whispered secrets in the dark, and Ryunosuke's hand tightened around the hilt of his katana. The dawn was coming, but the night still held many dangers. He would face them all, for the Empire of Shadows had not yet claimed him. And so, with the weight of his past and the hopes of the future pressing against him, Ryunosuke stepped forward, ready to carve his path through the encroaching darkness. The night in Edo was thick with an uneasy stillness, the kind that presses on the chest and tightens the grip of anticipation. Takeda Ryunosuke stood beneath the flickering light of a worn paper lantern, its glow casting elongated shadows across the damp stones of a narrow alleyway. Beside him, Kenta Moriyama's broad frame was taut with readiness, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The rain from earlier had left the air heavy and cool, scenting the city with the musk of wet earth and distant smoke. They waited for Aiko Hanami, their indispensable informant and ally, who had promised crucial information that could turn the tide in their perilous struggle against the conspirators threatening the shogunate. Ryonosuke's mind was a storm of thoughts, calculations, fears, and an unyielding sense of responsibility. The samurai code bound him to protect those who fought for justice alongside him. Yet tonight that code felt frail, as if the very trust he had placed in others might be his undoing. A faint rustling echoed from the shadows, and Ryonosuke's sharp eyes caught the delicate silhouette of Aiko emerging from the darkness. Her kimono, plain but elegant, brushed softly against her slender form as she stepped forward, her face set with a steely resolve that belied the danger surrounding them. Just as relief began to warm Ryonosuke's chest, a sudden clatter shattered the fragile quiet. From the depths of the alley, figures emerged, their movements swift and merciless. Ishikawa Taro, the corrupt government official and enforcer for Lord Matsuda Nobujuki, led a contingent of grim-faced men whose weapons gleamed coldly under the lantern's light. Before Ryunosuke could draw his sword, the trap snapped shut. Ico's startled gasp was cut short as strong hands seized her, dragging her backward with brutal efficiency. "No," Ryunosuke shouted, lunging forward, but Kenta grabbed his arm, holding him back. "We're outnumbered," Kenta growled, his eyes blazing with frustration and fury. "We must live to fight another day." But Ryunosuke's heart clenched with helpless rage. The betrayal was palpable. Someone within their circle had led Ishikawa's men to them. Trust, once a solid foundation, now crumbled beneath the weight of treachery. Later, in the dim solitude of a hidden chamber, Ryunosuke confronted the one he suspected most. The air between them was thick with accusation and disbelief. Faces shadowed, voices low but sharp. They exchanged words that cut deeper than any blade. "Why?" Ryunosuke demanded, his voice a mixture of hurt and anger. "Was our cause so meaningless that you would betray?" The betrayer's gaze faltered, a flicker of regret flashing briefly before stealing into cold resolve. "Survival demands sacrifice," came the whispered reply. "You would do the same if you wished to see the dawn." Ryunosuke's fists clenched, the bitter taste of betrayal burning in his mouth. Yet beneath the sorrow, a fierce determination ignited. The path ahead was darker than ever, but his resolve to rescue Aiko and expose the conspiracy only deepened. As the night waned, Ryunosuke found himself alone atop a rain-slicked rooftop, the sprawling city of Edo unfurling beneath him like a living tapestry of light and shadow. The soft patter of raindrops mingled with the distant murmur of the waking city. The weight of loss pressed down upon him, yet in the storm of his thoughts, a quiet clarity emerged. He was a solitary figure bound by the samurai code, yet now more than ever free to choose his own path amidst the empire of shadows. With the first pale light of dawn creeping over the horizon, Ryunosuke sheathed his sword and turned away from the cityscape. The battle was far from over, but his spirit remained unbroken. The fragile bonds of trust had been shattered, but from the shards a new resolve would arise, unyielding, relentless, and fiercely honorable. The fall of trust was a bitter wound, but it was not the end. It was the beginning of a deeper fight, one that would test every fiber of Ryunosuke's being. The shadows were closing in, but within the darkness, the flicker of hope endured a hope he would fight to protect, whatever the cost. The night hung thick over Edo, a heavy blanket of darkness pierced only by faint lanterns swaying gently in the cold breeze. Takeda Ryunosuke crouched low behind a stack of weathered crates, his sharp eyes scanning the warehouse before him. Beside him, Kenta Moriyama adjusted the grip on his katana. his breath steady despite the tension that coiled like a serpent inside his chest. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and rust, an oppressive stillness settling over the narrow street that seemed to hold its breath. "She's inside," Kenta whispered, his voice a low growl edged with urgency. "We don't have much time before the patrols change." Ryunosuke nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Aiko Hanami, the resourceful spy who had become their eyes and ears within Edo's elite, had been captured after the recent betrayal. Her disappearance was a wound that cut deep not only for her sake, but for the fragile web of trust they had painstakingly woven. Failure was not an option. The two Ronin moved with practiced stealth, shadows among shadows, as they approached the warehouse's side entrance. The heavy wooden door was barred and guarded, but Kenta's deft hands produced a small set of lockpicks, relics from their days as samurai turned outlaws. Moments stretched into eternity as delicate clicks echoed faintly in the night. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow corridor dimly lit by flickering lanterns. Inside, the scent of oil and sweat mingled with the metallic temps of sharpened blades. Ryunosuke signaled Kenta to proceed cautiously ahead, their footsteps muffled by tatami, mats worn thin by years of use. Each corner heightened the tension, every shadow a potential enemy, every whisper a threat. In a small, sparsely furnished room near the back of the warehouse, they found her. Aiko sat on the cold wooden floor, her wrists bound with coarse rope and bruises darkening the pale skin of her arms. Her dark eyes flickered with a mixture of relief and pain as Ryunosuke knelt beside her. "Ryunosuke," she breathed, voice hoarse. "They're planning something worse more than we feared. You must hurry." Before he could respond, the muffled sound of footsteps approached from the corridor. Ryunosuke's hand slid to the hilt of his katana, eyes narrowing as Kenta crouched beside the door, ready to strike. The tension snapped like a drawn bowstring as the guards entered, unaware of the storm waiting in the shadows. The battle was swift and brutal. Steel clashed with steel, the sound muffled beneath the rafters but no less deadly. Kenta's broad shoulders bore down with ferocious strikes, while Ryunosuke's movements were precise and measured, each cut calculated to disable rather than kill where possible. The enemies fell back one by one, their surprise and underestimation of the Ronin proving fatal. With the guards subdued, Ryunosuke cut Iso's bindings, helping her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, but her spirit remained unbroken. "We must leave now," he urged, glancing toward the windows where faint lantern lights suggested more foes were approaching. The narrow alleys of Edo became their refuge and their challenge. The city's maze-like streets twisted and turned, shadows playing tricks on weary eyes. Ryunosuke led the way, every sense alert to the faintest sound: footsteps, whispered voices, the clatter of armor. Kenta stayed close behind, a steadfast shield against any threat. As they slipped through the winding pathways, the first hints of dawn painted the horizon in shades of pale gold and crimson. Exhaustion tugged at their limbs, but the promise of survival and the fragile hope it carried drove them forward. In the quiet moments between breathless escapes and whispered plans, Ryunosuke's mind wrestled with the cost of their mission. The conspiracy they fought was no longer a distant shadow. It was a tangible menace tightening its grip with every heartbeat. Finally, reaching a secluded tea house known only to trusted allies, they paused. Aiko leaned heavily on Ryunosuke's shoulder, her eyes fierce despite the ordeal. "We have what we need," she said softly, "but they will come for us now." Ryunosuke's jaw tightened. "Then we prepare. We fight." The night's rescue had succeeded, but the war for Edo's soul was far from over. In the heart of the Empire of Shadows, honor demanded sacrifice, and the Ronin would answer its call as the darkness pressed ever closer. The distant crow of a rooster heralded the coming day, but for Ryunosku, the dawn was merely the beginning of another perilous chapter. His resolve hardened like tempered steel, the tension within mirrored in the awakening city around him. The fight for justice would test every fiber of his being, and the shadows he navigated held many more secrets yet to be revealed. And so, with a final glance toward the rising sun, Ryunosuke stepped forward into the uncertain light, his sword ready, his heart resolute, and the fate of the shogunate resting on the edge of his blade. The narrow alleyways of Edo still Kenta's broad shoulders bore the weight of alert to Kenta but the fragile carried himself frail despite the mist-laden street. Memories clawed his face, struggle abreast, tended to icy promise with broken fingers, and a flicker of candlelight shadows. But the rescue had been a perilous step, like he withdrew a polished guitar from the silence. His miracle escape punctuated over the city in soft string of the was an occasional gasp. Staring into the blade, he saw not just the man he was, but the man he was becoming. The lines of honor he had once drawn so sharply now blurred with the pragmatic need to survive and protect those he held dear. The rescue had been a victory, yes, but one shadowed by loss and sacrifice. The weight of command pressed heavily upon him, a constant reminder that every choice exacted a price. As dawn's first light crept through shoji screens, Elder Shogun arrived, his presence a balm to the troubled Ronin's soul. Beneath the blossoming cherry trees in the courtyard, where petals drifted like pale snowflakes, the elder's voice carried a quiet strength. "Ryunosuke-san," he began, his eyes steady and kind, "the path of honor is not one of rigidity but balance. You must learn when to bend, lest you break." The words resonated deeply, stirring a fragile hope amid the turmoil. The samurai code was not a chain, but a compass, guiding through the tempestuous seas of duty and desire. Ryunosuke absorbed the counsel, feeling the tension within him ease, if only slightly. Later, gathered around a low wooden table, Ryunosuke, Kenta, Iko, and Elder Shogun exchanged grave tidings. The conspiracy, far from unraveling, tightened its grip like a serpent coiling for the final strike. Each face bore the marks of weariness, dark shadows beneath eyes, lines of worry etched in flesh, but also a fierce determination. The alliance forged in blood and shared purpose was fragile yet unyielding. "Every step forward draws their eyes closer," Kenta murmured, his voice a gravelly reminder of the dangers ahead. Ryunosuke nodded, the weight of leadership settling firmly on his shoulders. "We stand at the crossroads. Our honor demands action, but our survival depends on wisdom." Iko, her strength slowly returning, met his gaze with a fierce spark. "We will see this through. For our fallen, for the future." The room seemed to hold its breath, the heavy silence between them filled with unspoken fears and resolute hope. Outside, the city stirred to life beneath a pale sky, the empire of shadows awaiting the dawn of reckoning. In the solitude of his chamber that night, Ryunosuke sat in quiet contemplation. The scars of the rescue, both visible and hidden, throbbed with the memories of sacrifice. His mind wrestled with the samurai code that had guided him since youth, its rigid demands clashing with the brutal realities of a world rife with treachery. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril, but his resolve burned undiminished. As the first light of morning crept over Edo's rooftops, Ryunosuke rose, steeling himself for the battles yet to come. The honor he bore was both his shield and his burden, a legacy of shadows and light intertwined. The empire trembled on the edge of upheaval, and he, a solitary Ronin, was bound to its fate. The story of Takeda Ryunosuke was far from over. With each breath, each choice, he wove his own legend into the tapestry of a land where honor and betrayal danced in the flickering shadows. And as the dawn broke, so too did the promise of a new beginning born from sacrifice, tempered by reflection and driven by an unyielding heart. The rain fell in relentless sheets over Edo, blurring the sharp edges of the narrow streets and washing away the dust of days past. Under the shadow of the sprawling city, Takeda Ryunosuke moved silently, his senses stretched to their limits. Each step was measured, each breath controlled, for he knew the enemy was close. Ishikawa Taro, the cold enforcer of Lord Matsuda, had made his intent clear: to crush Ryunosuke's investigation and silence the Ronin before he could unravel the conspiracy woven into the heart of the shogunate. The alleyways of Edo, usually bustling with merchants and townsfolk, were eerily empty tonight. The flicker of distant lanterns cast long, quivering shadows, and the scent of wet wood mingled with the faint aroma of incense from nearby shrines. Ryunosuke's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his katana beneath his kimono, ready to draw at the slightest sign of danger. Suddenly, a sharp clatter echoed from the end of the alley. Ryunosuke's eyes snapped to the sound. A group of figures emerged from the darkness, their faces obscured by cloth masks, weapons gleaming under the intermittent light. The ambush was no accident. It was a calculated strike by Ishikawa's men. Steel met steel in a flash. Ryunosuke moved with practiced grace, parrying a blow aimed at his side and countering with a precise strike that sent his assailant staggering back. The rain hissed as it came into contact with the clashing blades, and shouts rang out, muffled by the narrow walls. Despite the chaos, Ryunosuke's mind remained sharp, analyzing each opponent's style, searching for weaknesses. But the numbers were against him. A dagger grazed his shoulder, sharp and searing. Pain flared, but Ryunosuke pushed it aside, focusing on survival. With a swift maneuver, he disarmed one attacker and used the momentum to knock another into the wall. The fight was brutal and swift. There was no room for hesitation. When the last of the attackers fled into the night, Ryunosuke leaned against the cold wooden wall, his breath heavy but steady. The ambush was a clear message. Ishikawa was closing in. The corrupt official's reach was deeper than Ryunosuke had feared, and the danger was no longer confined to whispered plots. It was mortal combat in the shadows of Edo, days earlier. In a smoke-filled chamber within the government offices, Ishikawa Taro had convened with his most loyal conspirators. The room was dense with tension, the air thick with the scent of tobacco and the silent weight of power struggles. Ishikawa sat at the head of the low table, his piercing gaze fixed on each man and woman present. Ryunosuke is a threat we cannot ignore, Ishikawa stated coldly, his voice cutting through the murmur like a blade. His honor blinds him to the realities of power. We will use that. Trap him where he least expects it, and let his own code be his undoing. The officials nodded, their faces masks of resolve and greed. Plans were laid false, leads to misdirect the Ronin, informants to sow discord among his allies, and ambushes to wear down his body and spirit. Ishikawa's smile was thin but ruthless. He believed victory was assured. Back in the quiet sanctuary of a small garden beneath the fleeting blossoms of cherry trees, Ryunosuke met with Kenta Moriyama. The air was heavy with the scent of petals and damp earth, a stark contrast to the dark schemes encroaching upon them. "Your caution serves you well," Kenta said gruffly, his scarred hand gripping Ryunosuke's shoulder. "But we cannot hide forever. Ishikawa will not stop until he breaks us." Ryunosuke's eyes were steady. "Then we must be smarter. Honor must guide us, But we must also be pragmatic. Every step forward is a step into the enemy's lair, but retreat is no option. Their bond, forged in childhood and tempered by shared loss, was their anchor. Yet even their steadfast loyalty was tested by the weight of the conspiracy. In a shadowed tea-house, hidden from prying eyes, Iko Hanami slipped through the crowd, her movements graceful and deliberate. She approached Ryanosuke's table, her expression masked by calm, but her eyes betrayed the urgency within. "I have news," she whispered, sliding a folded parchment across the wood. "Ishikawa plans another strike tonight. This time, it will be in the heart of the city. We must act quickly." Ryunosuke unfolded the paper, scanning the hastily drawn map and notes. His fingers tightened around the parchment as he absorbed the danger looming. "We move at dusk," he declared, no hesitation. The night descended like a suffocating cloak as the Ronin and his allies prepared for the battle ahead. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every whisper a trap. Yet beneath the tension, a fierce determination burned within Ryunosuke, flame kindled by honor, loyalty, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. As dawn approached, Ryunosuke stood atop a rooftop overlooking Edo, the city bathed in the cold light of early morning. His thoughts were a tempest, but his resolve was clear. Ishikawa Taro was the enemy within the corruption that threatened to unravel the shogunate and the fragile peace it maintained. The coming days would test the limits of his endurance, his sword, and his code. But Takeda Ryunosuke was no stranger to shadows. He was the storm that would challenge them. And in the heart of the Empire's darkness, the Ronin prepared to strike. The rain began as a soft patter against the wooden eaves of the tea-house, a gentle prelude to the storm of unrest roiling beneath Edo's polished surface. Takeda Ryunosuke sat in the dim corner of the room, his sharp eyes fixed on the shadows that flickered beyond the paper screens. His breathing was steady, his mind a whirl of calculations and silent prayers to the ancestors. The city was a labyrinth of shifting loyalties and whispered threats, and tonight the fractures within the shogunate were widening with a dangerous sharpness. Lady Mitsuko entered quietly, her kimono swaying like a gentle wave as she moved with the grace of a seasoned courtier. The delicate scent of cherry blossoms seemed to cling to her, a stark contrast to the heavy tension that hung between them. She took the seat opposite Ryunosuke, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light. "The winds are changing, Ryunosuke-san," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of Edo's restless night. "Factions within the shogunate grow bolder, their ambitions clawing at each other like wolves in the dark." Ryunosuke nodded slowly, his fingers tightening around the ceramic cup. And yet, the shogun remains a silent observer. The peace is fragile, held together by threads that fray with every secret uncovered. Mitsuko's gaze hardened. "Lord Matsuda's reach extends further than you realize. His puppeteers pull at the strings behind closed doors, and many who swear loyalty to the shogun now harbor their own designs." A bitter laugh escaped Ryunosuke. "In this game, trust is the rarest currency. Even allies cast long shadows." Their conversation was interrupted by the low murmur of voices from the adjoining room. Through the lattice, Ryunosuke caught fragments of conversation-veiled threats exchanged over cups of bitter green tea. The rival samurai factions sat facing each other, their eyes sharp and calculating, hands never far from the hilts of their swords. Outside, the streets of Edo buzzed with the uneasy energy of a city on the brink. Lanterns cast long, wavering shadows that danced upon rain-slicked rooftops. Ryunosuke and Kenta moved silently along the narrow alleyways, their steps muffled by the wet earth. The weight of past battles and unspoken regrets pressed upon them, yet their vigilance never faltered. "The fractures run deeper than I feared," Kenta said quietly, his scarred face set in a grim line. "Some within our own ranks lean towards Lord Matsuda's vision, blinded by ambition or fear." Ryanosuke's jaw clenched. "We cannot afford division. If the shogunate falls to internal strife, the chaos will consume us all." Meanwhile, Aiko Hanami wove through the crowded marketplace, her slender form blending seamlessly with the throng of merchants and peasants. Her keen eyes darted from face to face, searching for the telltale signs of danger or opportunity. The scent of freshly ground tea mingled with the sharp temps of fish, and the clatter of wooden carts echoed through the narrow lanes. She paused beneath a faded banner, her breath steady despite the urgency pounding in her chest. A whispered warning from a street vendor sent her slipping into the shadows, narrowly avoiding the gaze of a pair of samurai whose intentions were anything but honorable. Back in the tea house, Ryanosuke's thoughts churned like the storm gathering outside. The political landscape was a treacherous sea, and every alliance was a fragile vessel at risk of capsizing. He knew that to succeed, he would have to navigate these waters with a careful hand, balancing honor with the ruthless pragmatism demanded by survival. As the night deepened, the fractures within the shogunate became impossible to ignore. Loyalties shifted like sand, and the line between friend and foe blurred into a shadowed grey. Ryanosuke's resolve hardened. The path ahead was perilous, but retreat was not an option. The dawn would bring new challenges, but for now, the city held its breath caught between the promise of peace and the storm of betrayal brewing just beneath the surface. And in the quiet corners of Edo, the Empire of Shadows moved inexorably toward its reckoning. The evening air in Edo was thick with the scent of incense and the low murmur of voices hidden behind sliding shoji doors. Iko Hanami moved with the grace of a shadow, her slender form cloaked in a plain kimono that belied the sharp intelligence in her eyes. Tonight, she was not merely a woman at a noble gathering, but a spider weaving her own web of secrets in the heart of the city. As she slipped silently through the corridors of the estate belonging to a minor daimyo, rumored to be sympathetic to Lord Matsuda's cause, every step was measured and deliberate. The glittering lanterns overhead cast flickering shadows on the lacquered floors, reflecting the polished smiles and painted faces that masked the true intentions of those present. Isio's gaze was steady, her ears attuned to the slightest hint of whispered conspiracies beneath the polite laughter and the clink of sake cups. She paused briefly near a group of samurai clad in elaborate armor, their voices low and cautious. From the fragments of conversation she caught, a plan was unfolding, one that would tip the fragile balance of power within the shogunate. Her heart quickened, but her face remained calm, a mask perfected through years of espionage. Retreating into a shadowed alcove, Aiko unfolded a small paper she had discreetly obtained earlier in the evening. The characters inked with precision revealed a secret meeting place and timer gathering of Lord Matsuda's closest allies preparing for a decisive move. This information was a beacon of hope for Ryunosuke and his allies, but it also painted a target squarely on her back. Later, in the solitude of her modest quarters, the weight of her double life pressed heavily upon her. The flickering candlelight danced across the tatami mats as she sat silently, her mind wrestling with the tension between the dangerous path she had chosen and the simple desire for peace that whispered in her heart. Aiko was no stranger to sacrifice. The fall of her family had forced her into this perilous existence, yet the loneliness and fear that accompanied her secret missions gnawed at her resolve. The following day, she met Ryunosuke and Kenta in a secluded tea house nestled within Edo's quieter streets. The soft glow of paper lanterns cast a warm light on their faces, emphasizing the lines of concern and determination etched by their shared burdens. Isio's voice was steady as she revealed the critical intelligence she had gathered, the hidden document that detailed the conspirators' next steps. Ryunosuke listened intently, his sharp eyes never leaving her face. "This changes everything," he murmured, a rare flicker of hope breaking through his usual stoicism. Kenta's broad shoulders tensed with anticipation, ready to act on the new information. Before parting, Aiko slipped a small, folded paper into Ryunosuke's hander, silent promise of trust amid the ever-present danger. The moment was charged with unspoken understanding. They were bound by a fragile alliance forged in shadows and secrecy. As the night deepened, Aiko returned to her solitary vigil, aware that each step forward increased the peril she faced. Yet, her resolve remained unshaken. In a world dominated by men and ruled by rigid codes, her strength was often unseen but no less vital. Through cunning, courage, and an unwavering spirit, she embodied the quiet power that could change the fate of an empire. Outside, the streets of Edo whispered with secrets, and the empire of shadows shifted ever closer to its breaking point. Within that darkness, Isio's light burned fiercely, an enduring testament to the strength of a woman who dared to defy the odds. The chapter closed on a note of tense anticipation, with Ryunosuke and his allies poised on the edge of a revelation that could alter the course of the shogunate forever. Yet the question lingered like the faint echo of footsteps in the night. Could Aiko's courage withstand the crushing weight of the coming storm? And so the dance of shadows continued, each step measured, each breath held, as the empire's fate hung in the balance. The evening air hung heavy with the scent of cherry blossoms, their petals drifting down like whispered prayers in the fading light. Takeda Ryunosuke sat beneath the ancient tree in the secluded garden behind a modest tea house, the tranquility of the moment a sharp contrast to the turmoil inside him. His sharp eyes, usually so steady and measured, now flickered with the weight of unspoken doubts. The samurai code, Bushido, had been his guiding light since the days of his youth, a beacon that had shaped every decision, every action. Yet now, as the shadows of conspiracy tightened around Edo, that code felt both a shield and a shackle. He found himself caught between the unwavering ideals of honor and the harsh demands of survival. In a world where enemies lurked behind every smile and loyalty was a fragile thread. A soft rustling of leaves stirred him from his reverie. Kenta Moriyama approached, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the dimming sky. The scars that marked his skin told tales of battles fought and loyalties earned, and his voice, when he spoke, was low but charged with a fierce energy. Ryunosuke, Kenta began, settling beside him on the weathered wooden bench. "We cannot afford hesitation. The enemy grows bolder. If we hold too tightly to honor, we risk losing everything, our lives, our cause, and those who depend on us." Ryunosuke's gaze did not waver. "Honor is not a chain, Kenta. It is the essence of who we are. To abandon it is to become no better than the traitors we fight." Kenta's eyes flashed with frustration, but honor does not mean foolishness. We must adapt, or we fall. The tension between them was palpable, a clash not just of words, but of deeply held beliefs. Their bond, forged in childhood and battle, was tested in the crucible of their current struggle. Yet beneath the conflict lay an unspoken respect, a recognition that both sought the same end, though their paths diverged. Before the argument could deepen, a soft voice interrupted them. Aiko Hanami stepped from the shadows, her lithe form wrapped in a plain kimono that belied the sharpness in her eyes. "I have news," she whispered urgently, glancing around to ensure they were not overheard. "Lord Matsuda's men plan to move tonight. The window to act is closing." Ryunosuke stood, the resolve in his posture hardening. "Then we have no time for doubts. We must act, but wisely." Later that night, beneath the flickering light of paper lanterns in Elder Shogun's modest chamber, Ryunosuke sought counsel. The elder's face, etched with lines of wisdom and hardship, was calm as he spoke. "Ryunosuke Shogun began, his voice steady. The weight of honor is a heavy burden, but it is not a cage. The code guides us, but it does not blind us. Sometimes survival and justice require flexibility. To be honorable is not to be rigid. It is to be true to one's heart and purpose." The words struck a chord deep within Ryunosuke. He realized that to protect what he held dear, his allies, the fragile peace, and his own soul, he must embrace a new understanding of honor, one that allowed for pragmatism without surrendering principle. As dawn approached, Ryunosuke stood once more beneath the cherry tree, now bathed in the soft glow of morning light. The petals, no longer falling silently, seemed to dance with renewed life. He breathed deeply, the tension within him easing but not vanishing. The path ahead remained perilous, but his steps were steadier, guided by a resolve that balanced heart and duty. He would fight not only with the blade, but with wisdom, and in that balance lay hope for justice, for redemption, and for the enduring spirit of the samurai. The fragile calm was shattered by a distant call. The city was stirring, and with it, the shadows would soon move again. Ryunosuke's journey was far from over, and the weight of honor would continue to shape every choice he made. But now he carried it with a new strength, tempered like the steel of his katana, sharp and unyielding. With a final glance at the awakening sky, Ryunosuke turned toward the uncertain horizon, ready to face whatever dawn might bring. The air in the small chamber was thick with the scent of burning tallow and the faint, bitter aroma of ink and aged paper. Flickering candles cast tremulous light upon the maps spread across the low wooden table, their edges curling with the passage of time. Takeda Ryunosuke stood silently, his sharp eyes scanning the intricate lines that traced the city of Edo and its surrounding defenses. His fingers, calloused from years of swordsmanship, traced the paths where the conspirators might strike. The weight of impending conflict pressed heavily on his stoic frame. Kenta Moriyama's broad shoulders loomed as he leaned closer, pointing to a cluster of darkened points on the map. "They gather near the northern gates," he said bluntly, his voice low but carrying an edge of urgency. "Enough men to overwhelm the guards if they strike at dawn." Iko Hanami, graceful but tense, folded her arms, her eyes glinting with both worry and resolve. "Our spies report that Lord Matsuda's factions have secured additional mercenaries. They intend to seize the palace swiftly. We must anticipate every move." Ryunosuke nodded slowly, absorbing their counsel. The shogun's forces are stretched thin, and many officials remain uncertain where their loyalties lie. This betrayal runs deeper than we feared. Outside, the city of Edo pulsed with life, unaware of the shadowed storm gathering at its gates. Beneath the blood-red moon, Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki stood amongst his conspirators, his dark robes flowing like a river of night. His cold gaze swept over the assembled men, their armor glinting like obsidian shards in the moonlight. "The time has come," Matsuda declared, his voice steady and commanding. "Our patience has borne fruit. At dawn, we strike and reclaim what was stolen from us." The shogunate will bow to a new order. Whispers of assent rippled through the ranks, the sense of destiny palpable. Yet within that gathering lay the seeds of their undoing, a fragile alliance bound by ambition and fear. Back in the shadows of Ido, Aiko moved like a ghost through the corridors of an influential noble estate. Her kimono brushed softly against the polished wooden floors as she crept toward a concealed chamber where she could transmit vital intelligence. To Ryunosuke and Kenta, her breath was shallow, heart pounding in rhythm with the risk she bore. Every step could bring discovery, every whisper could invite death. Reaching her destination, she relayed the latest movements of the conspirators, her voice barely more than a murmur, yet filled with fierce determination. They will strike from the north gate at dawn. Their numbers are larger than we expected. We must be ready. Kenta clenched his fists, his scarred face grim. Then we have little time. Ryunosuke, what is your command? Ryunosuke's eyes darkened as he contemplated the storm gathering not only outside but within himself. The samurai code that had guided him now demanded a reckoning. Could honor withstand the sacrifices required? Could loyalty survive the betrayals yet to come? As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Ryunosuke found himself alone atop a rooftop that overlooked the sprawling city. The cool breeze carried the scent of cherry blossoms mingled with the acrid smoke of distant fires, a bitter reminder of the chaos to come. He closed his eyes, centering his thoughts, drawing strength from the ancient traditions that bound his soul. The empire hangs by a thread, he whispered to the wind, but I will not let it unravel. Below, the streets of Edo began to stir, oblivious to the gathering storm. Yet, in the hearts of Ryunosuke and his allies, the tension was palpable, a silent vow to stand firm, to fight for justice and honor in a world where shadows cloaked friend and foe alike. The coming hours would test them beyond measure, and the fate of the shogunate would be decided not by words, but by steel and sacrifice. As Ryunosuke sheathed his katana, the weight of the battle ahead settled upon him. The storm was here, and he would face it, unwavering. But even as he prepared, a flicker of doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Would the bonds of loyalty hold, or would betrayal tear them apart when the moment came? The answer would reveal itself in the crucible of dawn. The city held its breath, and so did he. The night air hung heavy with a chill as Takeda Ryunosuke crouched beneath the overhanging eaves of the shogun's palace. The sprawling complex loomed before him, fortress of lacquered wood, ornate gold leaf, and meticulously maintained gardens that whispered of power and tradition. Each stone lantern cast trembling pools of light, barely piercing the darkness that cloaked his approach. Every breath he took was measured, every muscle coiled tightly against the cold and the menace that lurked within. Ryunosuke's eyes, sharp and unblinking, scanned the wooden veranda before him. The shogunate's heart beat within these walls, and somewhere inside, the mastermind of the conspiracy plotted the empire's fate. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his katana, the steel's cold promise a steady companion in this perilous undertaking. The Ronin's past weighed heavily, but it was honor, his unyielding code, that propelled him forward now. Moving with the silence of a shadow, Ryunosuke slipped through a side entrance left unguarded in the dim hour before dawn. The polished floorboards creaked faintly beneath his footsteps, a sound swallowed quickly by the palace's vastness. Ornate sliding doors, decorated with painted cranes and cherry blossoms, passed by as he navigated the labyrinthine corridors. The scent of incense mingled with the subtle musk of aged wood and ink from scrolls piled high in private chambers. Ahead, a faint rustle caught his attention. From the darkness emerged Aiko Hanami, her slender frame draped in a muted kimono that blended perfectly with the palace's muted tones. Her eyes, sharp and alert, met his with a silent greeting. She beckoned him with a deft hand, guiding him through a narrow passage that led to a concealed vantage point overlooking the grand audience hall. From their hidden perch, Ryunosuke observed Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki standing tall and imposing. The daimyo's dark robes shimmered subtly in the lantern light, his cold gaze sweeping across a gathering of high-ranking conspirators. The air was thick with whispered schemes and veiled threats, the weight of betrayal pressing down like a shroud. Matsuda's voice was low but commanding, every word laced with ruthless ambition and icy certainty. Ryunosuke's heart thundered beneath his cloak, a fierce rhythm of tension and resolve. Here, in the very palace that symbolized order and peace, a dangerous game of shadows unfolded. The Ronin's mission was clear: uncover the depths of this treachery and strike a blow for justice, even if it meant walking through fire. Suddenly, the soft shuffle of footsteps approached from behind. Kenta Moriyama materialized silently at Ryunosuke's side, his broad shoulders cloaked in dark fabric that concealed the scars of countless battles. Without a word, he nodded toward a distant corridor where the sharp clang of steel suddenly shattered the palace's fragile calm. A desperate duel erupted, Kenta locked in fierce combat with Ishikawa Taro, the corrupt official whose loyalty to Lord Matsuda was as unyielding as it was deadly. Blades sang through the air, sparks flying as steel met steel in a violent dance of survival. Ryunosuke tightened his grip on his sword, every sense heightened, knowing that the outcome here would tip the scales of fate. As the clash intensified, Ryunosuke edged closer to the heart of the conspiracy. Every shadow might conceal a foe, every whisper could signal betrayal. Yet, amid the danger, his resolve did not waver. He was the silent blade in the night, the guardian of a fragile peace, bound by honor even as the world around him crumbled. The palace, with its gilded halls and secret passages, became a battleground where loyalty was tested and the true cost of justice revealed. Ryunosuke's eyes burned with determination as he prepared to face Lord Matsuda himself, confrontation that would decide not only his fate but the future of the shogunate. The night stretched on, the struggle within the palace a testament to the relentless shadows that cloaked ambition and treachery. And through it all, Ryunosuke moved like a wraith, a solitary figure entwined in the empire of shadows, ready to ignite the spark that might restore honor or consume them all. Yet even as the first pale light of dawn threatened the horizon, the Ronin's path remained perilous. The palace's silence was a fragile veneer, soon to be shattered by the storm of blades and wills converging in a deadly dance. Ryunosuke's breath came steady, his spirit unbroken, his sword poised to carve a new destiny from the darkness. This night would be remembered as the turning point, the moment when the shadows revealed their deepest secrets, and one man's honor stood against the tide of corruption and ambition. Takeda Ryunosuke was no longer a wanderer but a force bound by duty, ready to face the ultimate test within the palace's hallowed walls. As the heavy doors to the inner chamber creaked open, a hush fell over the conspirators. Ryunosuke's time had come. The final act was about to begin. The grand hall of the shogun's palace lay cloaked in a dense, uneasy silence as Takeda Ryunosuke stepped through the heavy sliding doors, the weight of his blade at his side grounding him in the moment. The flickering candlelight cast long, trembling shadows that danced along the polished wooden floor, their wavering forms mirroring the turmoil in his heart. Every breath was measured, every movement deliberate. The very air seemed charged with anticipation, as if the ancient walls themselves held their breath. Ahead, the imposing figure of Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki awaited him. His dark robes flowing like a shadow among shadows, eyes sharp and unyielding beneath furrowed brows. Ryonosuke's gaze met Matsuda's cold, calculating stare without flinching. This was the man who had orchestrated the web of betrayal, threatening to unravel the shogunate's delicate balance. The architect of countless innocent lives shattered beneath his ambition. And now, here, in the heart of power, they would settle their fates with steel and honor. "You have come far, Ryunosuke," Matsuda said, his voice a low, measured rumble that echoed softly against the high ceiling. "But your adherence to that outdated code will be your undoing. Power belongs to those willing to seize it, not to those who cling to ideals." Ryonosuke's jaw tightened. "Power without honor is a poison that will kill the land you claim to protect. Today, I end this." With a swift motion, Ryunosuke drew his katana, the blade singing softly as it slipped free from its scabbard. Matsuda responded in kind, his own sword gleaming coldly in the candlelight. The clash of steel shattered the stillness, a thunderous rhythm of strikes and parries echoing through the hall. Each movement was a conversation, sharp, precise, laden with years of training and unspoken grievances. Ryonosuke's strikes were swift, born from a lifetime of discipline and a burning desire for justice. Matsuda countered with ruthless efficiency, every blow calculated to exploit weakness and hesitation. In the shadows near the entrance, Kenta Moriyama watched, his broad shoulders tense, the scars on his face a testament to battles fought and loyalty unwavering. His eyes flicked between the dueling figures, heart pounding with anxious hope. He knew the stakes. Failure here would mean the collapse of everything they had fought for. As the duel intensified, Ryunosuke felt the weight of his past pressing down upon him, the fallen clan, the betrayals, the code that had both guided and constrained him. Yet with every breath he chose to press forward, balancing honor with pragmatism, wielding both as weapons against darkness. Matsuda lunged with a sudden ferocity, forcing Ryunosuke to parry with a sharp clang that sent vibrations through his arms. The cold steel bit into the wood beneath their feet as they circled, two predators locked in a deadly dance. "You could join me," Matsuda hissed, his voice laced with venomous promise. "Together, we could reshape this empire. You, with your skill, and honor me, with my vision and power." Ryunosuke's eyes narrowed. "I would rather die by my own blade than live under your tyranny." With a final decisive strike, Ryunosuke disarmed Matsuda, sending his sword clattering to the floor. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of the two men. Matsuda's face twisted into a fleeting expression of regret before hardening once more. "So be it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Ryunosuke stepped back, lowering his blade but keeping his guard. "Your conspiracy ends here. The shogunate will endure, but the cost of your ambition will not be forgotten." Outside the hall, the distant sound of approaching footsteps signaled the arrival of loyal guards, summoned by the disturbance. Kenta stepped forward, relief washing over his face as he closed the distance to Ryunosuke. "It is done," Ryunosuke said quietly, though the weight of victory pressed heavily on him. "But the path ahead remains uncertain. Honor is a burden, and justice is never without sacrifice." As they exited the palace, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a soft glow that promised renewal yet whispered of lingering shadows. Ryunosuke walked forward, a solitary figure caught between the past and the future, bound by the samurai code yet free from the darkness that once consumed him. His journey was far from over, but in this moment The empire of shadows had been pierced by a blade of resolve and hope. The shogun's palace lay in a heavy silence, broken only by the distant echoes of footsteps and the occasional creak of ancient wood settling under the weight of a dawn that promised a new era, yet bore the somber stain of bloodshed. Takeda Ryunosuke stood motionless, his breath shallow and ragged, the weight of his armor seeming to press down harder than any enemy's blade ever had. Around him, the once grand chamber bore the scars of the fierce battle, the shattered screens, splintered floorboards, and the subtle scent of incense mingled with iron and sweat. Before him, Lord Matsuda Nobuyuki lay unconscious, the cold calculation that had once animated his every move now extinguished like a flickering candle snuffed out in the wind. Ryunosuke's eyes, sharp yet clouded with exhaustion, scanned the room and then rested upon his own hands, stained and trembling slightly. The victory was his, yet it felt hollow. The conspirator who had sought to reshape the shogunate through shadow and deceit was undone. But the price paid was carved deep into Ryunosuke's soul. His body ached with wounds both seen and unseen. His spirit bore the heavier burden of loss of comrades fallen, of innocence shattered, and of the relentless demands of honor that left no room for escape. The heavy wooden doors of the chamber creaked open, and Kenta Moriyama entered, his broad shoulders hunched with weariness, but his eyes alight with unyielding loyalty. Without a word, Kenta moved swiftly to Ryunosuke's side, offering steady support as the Ronin's legs threatened to give way beneath him. The two men, bound by a bond forged in childhood and tempered by countless battles, exchanged a glance, one filled with unspoken understanding of the cost borne and the battles yet to come. Outside, the first light of dawn spilled over Edo's sprawling rooftops, casting long shadows that seemed to retreat before the growing promise of day. The distant tolling of temple bells signaled the shattering of the conspiracy's grip. But the city's streets remained tense, aware that peace was a fragile veneer over deep-seated rivalries and wounds. Within the quiet of a nearby chamber, Aiko Hanami, her face pale from recent captivity but her spirit unbroken, met Ryunosuke's gaze. With careful words, she recounted the political tremors their actions had set in motion, whispers of dissent among the noble houses, power vacuums waiting to be filled, and the uncertain path ahead for the shogunate. Her voice, though steady, betrayed the vulnerability of one who had seen the undercurrents of danger up close. Yet her presence was a beacon of hope amid the encroaching shadows. Lady Mitsuko entered then, her noble bearing undiminished despite the grim circumstances. Bowing solemnly, she acknowledged Ryunosuke's triumph and the heavy burden it entailed. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the room, mirroring the complex interplay of honor and loss that defined the moment. Her words were few, but weighted with respect and shared sorrow, a silent testament to the sacrifices demanded by loyalty and duty. Ryunosuke allowed himself a rare moment of stillness, reflecting on the path that had led him here from the haunted streets of Edo to the heart of a conspiracy that threatened the very empire he once believed in. The samurai code that had guided him was both a shield and a chain, offering clarity yet demanding sacrifices that no man could fully reconcile. As the city stirred awake under the new light, Ryunosuke knew this was not an end but a beginning. The shogunate had survived, but the cost was etched into the bones of those who had fought for it. His own journey would continue alone, burdened yet resolute. The empire of shadows remained, but within its depths, a single flame of justice still burned. The wind brushed through the open windows, carrying with it the mingled scents of cherry blossoms and smoke. Ryunosuke stepped forward, each movement deliberate, the weight of his choices settling like armor around his weary heart. The dawn was breaking, and with it came the quiet promise of a future shaped by those willing to bear the price of honor. Yet even as the light grew stronger, the shadows lingered reminders that in a world built on loyalty and betrayal, the path of the samurai was never truly free from darkness. And so, with a final glance to the rising sun, Ryunosuke moved forward, his resolve unbroken, his spirit tempered by loss but never defeated. The price of victory was high, but it was a price he was prepared to pay, because, in the empire of shadows, honor was the only light that could guide a lost soul home. The soft rustle of the bamboo leaves was the only sound accompanying Takeda Ryunosuke as he sat quietly on the veranda of a small tea house perched on the outskirts of Edo. The dawn had painted the sky with hues of pale gold and muted lavender. Yet the serenity of the morning was at odds with the turmoil that churned beneath his stoic exterior. His sharp eyes, framed by a weathered face, marked with the passage of countless battles and sleepless nights, scanned the mist-covered garden before him. Each droplet of dew glinted like a fleeting memory, fragile yet indelible. Ryunosuke's thoughts drifted to the sacrifices he had made, the lives lost, and the rigid code that had governed his every action. The samurai code, Bushido, had been his guiding light, a beacon of honor and duty. Yet now, in the aftermath of the bitter conflict that had shaken the foundations of the shogunate, it felt more like a heavy burden, shackling him to a path fraught with pain and doubt. The faces of fallen comrades haunted him, their silent reproach echoing in the chambers of his heart. The stillness of the morning was broken by the soft clink of armor. Kenta Moriyama approached, his broad shoulders hunched slightly beneath the weight of his battle-worn gear. The deep scars that crisscrossed his face told stories of their own, stories of loyalty tested and blood spilled in the name of a fallen clan. He stopped beside Ryunosuke without a word, the tension between them palpable yet underscored by a bond forged in fire and hardship. "You sit as if the world's weight rests on your shoulders," Kenta said gruffly, his voice low but edged with concern. "Honor is not just about clinging to old codes, Ryunosuke. Sometimes it demands sacrifice, not just of life, but of pride." Ryunosuke's eyes met Kenta's, the unspoken history between them filling the space. And what if sacrificing pride means betraying the very code that defines us? He replied quietly, the conflict evident in his tone. "Is there honor in compromise?" Kenta's jaw tightened. There is honor in survival, and in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. We fight not for ourselves, but for the future, even if that future is uncertain. The exchange lingered as the two men sat side by side, their silence heavy with meaning. It was then that Elder Shogun appeared, his presence like a calming breeze amid the storm. The aged samurai moved with a grace that belied his years, settling beside Ryunosuke with a serene smile beneath his long white beard. "The cherry blossoms bloom but briefly," Shogun began, his voice steady and wise. "They remind us that life is fleeting, and that honor must be tempered with compassion. The code is a guide, not a shackle. Remember, Ryunosuke, that mercy is not weakness, but strength concealed." Ryunosuke absorbed the words, feeling the weight of his mentor's wisdom settle deep within him. The parable wove through his mind like a soothing balm, easing the sharp edges of his inner turmoil. As the day wore on, the conversation turned inward. Ryunosuke reflected on the choices that had brought him here, the betrayals, the battles, and the painful sacrifices. The samurai code that once seemed so absolute now shimmered with complexity, revealing the tension between strict adherence and the need for adaptability. When dusk finally fell, Ryunosuke found himself standing alone at the edge of a cliff overlooking the sprawling city of Edo. The city lights flickered below like a sea of stars, a testament to resilience amidst darkness. The cool night air whispered against his skin, carrying the scent of distant fires and the faint hum of life continuing despite the shadows. He clenched his fists, the resolve hardening within him. Though the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, he knew that his path must evolve. The echoes of sacrifice would guide him, not as chains, but as the foundation of a new understanding, one that allowed for mercy, pragmatism, and the enduring pursuit of justice. "The code is not my master," he murmured to the night. "It is my compass, and I will follow it, even if the path leads through darkness." With one last look at the shimmering city below, Ryunosuke turned away from the cliff's edge, stepping forward into the unknown. The dawn was still distant, but within him burned a quiet hope, a determination to carry the legacy of honor beyond the shadows and into whatever future awaited. Yet, as the wind carried the soft sound of distant footsteps, a subtle unease lingered. The sacrifices made were not over, and the choices Ryunosuke must face were yet to come. But for now, in this moment between night and day, he embraced the burden and the beacon of his code alike, the echoes of sacrifices that lay ahead on the breeze. A solemn reminder that honor was not merely a tradition, but a living, breathing force, one that demanded courage, reflection, and above all, heart. And as the first stars faded beneath the coming dawn, Takeda Ryunosuke stood resolute, the embodiment of the samurai spirit amidst the empire of shadows. The pale light of dawn crept slowly over Edo, casting long, gentle shadows across the city's wooden rooftops and narrow alleys. Takeda Ryunosuke stood silently on the veranda of a modest dwelling, his temporary refuge, his sharp eyes tracing the waking movements of the city below. The once tumultuous streets now bore a fragile calm, the echoes of battle and conspiracy replaced by the soft murmur of daily life resuming its course. Yet within Ryunosuke's chest, a storm of unease churned quietly beneath his composed exterior. The shogunate, bruised but unbroken, had begun the slow process of healing. The conspirators who threatened its fragile peace had been unmasked and defeated, their shadows lifted by Ryunosuke's relentless pursuit of justice. Still, victory brought no celebration, no chorus of gratitude. Instead, an aching void stretched between him and the world he had saved, a world that no longer felt like his own. He inhaled deeply, the scent of blooming cherry blossoms carried on a gentle breeze filtering through the open sliding doors. The delicate petals fluttered down like soft whispers, settling on the wooden floorboards at his feet. Such beauty seemed cruelly indifferent to the cost paid in blood and betrayal. Ryunosuke's thoughts drifted to those lost friends, foes, and innocents caught in the merciless tides of ambition. His solitude was broken by the faint sound of approaching footsteps. Turning, he saw Lady Mitsuko gliding across the garden path toward him, her elegant kimono trailing lightly behind her. Her presence was a balm to the weary Ronina, reminder that amidst the shadows there were still those who cared. "Ryunosuke-san," she greeted softly, bowing with grace. "The city awakens, and with it, a new hope stirs. But I see the weight upon your shoulders remains heavy." He nodded, accepting the delicate bowl of tea she offered. The warmth seeped into his hands, grounding him in the moment. "The shogunate endures, Lady Mitsuko. Yet I find myself adrift, a relic of a past that no longer has place." Her eyes, reflecting the flickering candlelight within the room, held quiet understanding. "You carry the burden of honor as if it were a blade cutting both ways. But remember, even the sharpest sword must sometimes bend to survive. Ryunosuke's gaze fell to the steaming tea, the fragile steam curling upward like a promise. Perhaps, but I fear that bending may cost me more than I am willing to pay. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Kenta Moriyama, whose broad frame filled the doorway as he entered with a determined air. Ryunosuke, the peace we fought for is fragile. You cannot carry it alone. Without a word, Ryunosuke followed Kenta outside to the garden, where the damp earth still held the scent of last night's rain. They engaged in a sparring match, blades flashing under the soft morning light, each strike a conversation of its own. Kenta's straightforward, forceful style contrasted with Ryunosuke's measured precision, yet beneath their practiced movements lay a tension neither voiced. The pain of distance grown between comrades, once inseparable. After a final parry, they parted, breath ragged, the unspoken truth lingering like the fading echo of steel. You carry too much alone, Kenta said, his voice rough with concern. We all do. Ryunosuke's only reply was a brief nod, the weight of brotherhood both a comfort and a chain. Meanwhile, in the bustling marketplace, Aiko Hanami moved with quiet purpose, her plain kimono blending with the throng of merchants and townsfolk. Her keen eyes missed nothing, the hopeful smiles, the wary glances, the undercurrent of tension beneath revived commerce. She gathered whispers and rumors, a shadow weaving through the light, her mind balancing the delicate dance of espionage and survival. Despite the outward calm, Aiko knew the world had not forgotten the shadows from which it had just emerged. The price of peace was eternal vigilance, and she was determined to stand watch. As day fully awakened, Ryunosuke returned to his quarters, the solitude pressing in once more. He contemplated the path ahead, no longer a wandering shadow, yet not fully embraced by the light. The samurai code that had guided him for so long now felt like both armor and shackle. He understood that his journey was far from over. The empire had survived, but at great cost, and Ryunosuke himself must find a new way to honor those sacrifices, whether within the fold of society or beyond its reach. The first rays of the sun broke over the horizon, bathing Edo in a soft golden glow. Ryunosuke stepped outside, the cool morning air filling his lungs. With a steadying breath, he began walking forward into the uncertain dawn. A solitary figure bound by the samurai code, yet free from the empire's shadows. His story was no longer solely about survival or vengeance. It was about endurance, hope, and the quiet strength to carve a place in a world forever changed. And as the city stirred to life beneath the awakening sky, so too did the ember of Ryunosuke's resolve faint but unyielding, promising that even in the darkest times the dawn would come. The chill of the evening air wrapped around Takeda Ryunosuke as he settled onto the jagged rocks overlooking Edo. The sprawling city below flickered with countless lanterns, each a small beacon against the impending night, but to Ryunosuke they seemed as distant and unreachable as the stars winking overhead. The wind stirred the tall pines behind him, their needles whispering secrets in the language of the ancients. He inhaled deeply, the scent of incense mingling faintly with smoke and the earthiness of the encroaching night. This solitude was no longer unfamiliar, but a chosen state, a quiet fortress against the chaos of the world he had just left behind. Years of wandering had tempered him like the steel of his blade, each battle and betrayal carving deeper into his soul. The bitter taste of loss still lingered, a shadow that clung stubbornly despite the gradual light of hope he sought to kindle within. Bound by the samurai code, yet free from allegiance, Ryunosuke had learned that honor was not a chain, but a compass. It guided him even as it weighed heavily on his shoulders. The empire of shadows he once fought to protect was fractured, and so too was the man who had stood in its defense. A soft rustle of footsteps drew his gaze to the path where Kenta Moriyama approached, his broad silhouette cutting a familiar figure against the darkening sky. The scarred Ronin's face was etched with the same weariness and resolve. Without a word, Kenta settled beside Ryunosuke, sharing the silence that spoke volumes. "The city changes," Kenta said finally, his voice a low rumble, "yet the shadows remain." Ryunosuke nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "We have done what we could, but now the path forward is mine alone." Kenta's gaze held a mixture of respect and sorrow. "Solitude is a heavy burden, brother. It is the only way I can remain true to the code." Ryunosuke replied quietly, "To live within the shadows, yet not be consumed by them." The following days brought a fleeting reunion with Aiko Hanami in a quiet tea house tucked away from prying eyes. The room was modest, paper lanterns casting a soft amber glow, the faint aroma of brewed tea mingling with the lingering tension between them. Aisio's graceful figure seemed at odds with the dangerous life she led, but her sharp wit and fierce loyalty shone through every measured word. "You carry the weight of all this," she said, her eyes searching his face. "Yet still, you walk forward." Ryunosuke met her gaze steadily. "Honor demands no less. But solitude will be my shield and my sword now." Their conversation was brief, but laden with unspoken understanding. The bonds forged in fire and betrayal would not be easily broken, yet Ryunosuke knew his journey must diverge from theirs. The world they had fought to save could no longer hold him. Before his departure, Elder Shogun found Ryunosuke beneath a blossoming cherry tree, the delicate petals drifting down like pale snowflakes in the gentle spring breeze. The aged samurai's calm presence was a balm to the restless Ronin. "The code is a path, not a prison," Shogun said, his voice steady with the weight of years. "Balance is the way of the true warrior between honor and pragmatism, between solitude and connection." Ryunosuke listened intently, the old man's words settling deep within. "I have been rigid," he admitted, "but now I see that strength lies in knowing when to yield and when to stand firm." Shogun nodded. "The Empire's shadows will always surround us, but you choose the light you carry within." At dawn, Ryunosuke stood alone at the threshold of a mountain path, the first light casting golden hues across the land. His silhouette, sharp and resolute, was framed by the rising sun. The air was crisp and filled with the promise of renewal. He tightened the sash of his kimono, the simple but well-maintained samurai attire, a testament to his enduring spirit. With each step into the unknown, Ryunosuke embraced the solitude he had once feared. His heart still beat with tension, the unresolved conflicts of his past and the uncertain future, but now tempered by a fierce determination. The samurai code was no longer a burden, but a beacon, guiding him through the empire of shadows. As the path wound upward, the distant sounds of Edo faded into the morning stillness. Ryunosuke's mind was clear, his resolve unshaken. He walked not as a lost Ronin, but as a sentinel of honor, poised against the encroaching darkness, ready to face whatever fate awaited beyond the dawn. Yet, in the depths of his heart, a quiet question lingered. Could a man truly remain honorable while walking alone, when the world he once knew was fractured by betrayal and deceit? The answer awaited him on the winding road ahead, where shadows and light intertwined in an eternal dance. And so, beneath the awakening sky, Takeda Ryunosuke stepped forward, solitary, steadfast, and unyielding, into the next chapter of his journey. The pale light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, casting a gentle glow across the sprawling city of Ido from a quiet hilltop. Takeda Ryunosuke stood motionless, his sharp eyes tracing the awakening cityscape below. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of cherry blossoms that fluttered softly in the morning breeze. This moment of serene stillness was a fragile reprieve, a breath held between the storm that had passed and the uncertain future before him. Ryunosuke's figure was a silhouette against the softening sky. Tall and lean, clad in the simple but well-maintained attire of a samurai who had long since shed noble trappings. His weathered face, marked by the years of hardship and loss, was calm yet resolute. Beneath the quiet exterior, a fierce determination burned the embers of a man who had fought not for glory but for justice, honor, and a fragile hope that the empire might yet find balance. Behind him, hidden by the embrace of the early morning mist, Aiko Hanami and Kenta Moriyama watched in silence. The light caught the delicate lines of Aiko's slender form, her plain kimono folding softly around her as she held herself with quiet grace and strength. Beside her, Kenta's broad shoulders tensed, scarred hands clenched loosely as he bore the weight of their shared sacrifices. Their gazes were heavy with unspoken sorrow, the pain of loss, the fracture of comradeship, and the respect for the path Ryunosuke must now walk alone. The city behind them was slowly stirring, merchants opening stalls, the distant clatter of wooden geta on cobblestone, and the faint murmur of prayers from a nearby temple. Yet, for Ryunosuke, the world felt both vast and isolating. The wounds of betrayal and the cost of victory lay deep within his soul, etched by the faces of friends fallen and trust shattered. Still, the samurai code that had guided him through darkness remained a steady beacon, compelling him forward. Far from the hill, in a shadowed chamber adorned with delicate screens and rich tapestries, Lady Mitsuko sat alone. The flickering candlelight danced across her composed features as she penned a letter with deliberate strokes. Her eyes, sharp and clear despite the late hour, betrayed her concern for the fragile political landscape she had helped protect. Every word was weighed with care, a secret, a lie's pledge to guard the embers of peace she and Ryunosuke had fought to preserve. Back on the hill, Ryunosuke adjusted the worn leather strap of his katana sheath, feeling the familiar weight settle against his side. The blade was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of his honor, a tether to the past, and a promise to the future. With one final breath, he turned from the city, his footsteps steady as he descended the hill toward a narrow forest path. The forest was alive with the sounds of morning birdsong weaving through the rustle of leaves, the soft crunch of fallen foliage beneath his sandals, and the distant flow of a hidden stream. Light filtered through the canopy, igniting the world in warm hues of orange and gold. Each step carried him away from the shadows of political intrigue and toward an uncertain horizon. Yet solitude did not mean surrender. Ryunosuke's heart pulsed with quiet resolve. The empire of shadows would endure, as would he, not as a pawn of power, but as a guardian of the samurai code and a seeker of justice in a world where trust was scarce and honor costly. As the sun rose higher, Ryunosuke's silhouette merged with the landscape, a solitary figure walking into the dawn, a testament to endurance, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of a path that few dared to follow. The empire might be shrouded in shadows, but within him burned a steadfast light, a beacon for the days yet to come. And so, with the first light warming his face and the whisper of the wind urging him onward, Takeda Ryunosuke stepped into the new day, a ronin bound by honor, shaped by loss, and forever determined to walk the path of justice alone. The story closed not with a promise of peace, but with the enduring tension of a man who knew that in a world of shadows, the true battle was never over. As the dawn unfurled its glow, Ryanosku's journey continued, a solemn oath whispered beneath the rising sun.